Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 147th live stream for the Misfit Gamer Studios. I am your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussion, second episode of 2025. We are very excited to get started. We have the first homebrew review of 2025, and it is a new race called the Faras Alnahr. I think I have that right. I don't know. Maybe if MartyTheFearless gets in here, who is the author, maybe if they get in here, they can correct us. But I think that's how we pronounce it. Maybe we're wrong. We'll figure it out. But we are very excited. Hecate Cosmic, see you in chat. Fantastic that you're here. We don't have a whole lot of updates. We just are waiting on a couple upgrades to the stream, but I don't know how much I want to talk about that. I kind of want those to be a surprise. So we do have a couple things coming. Give us maybe the next 6 weeks, and we should have some very unique updates coming to the stream in general. But yes, let's. Wow, stream, you good? Okay, we're good here. We're good. What's going on? Why are you so bright? Oh, that's, yeah. I was like, why is it so bright?
I always forget to.
That's okay. Wait, so this was supposed to go up. There we go. That's
there it is.
That's a little bit better. Okay, take the shine away, and then I think mine has to go up one. That's right. It's so hard when I have like weekends where I just like do other things in here, and then I completely change. It would be nice if everything was on some kind of circuit where I could just have a button. And that it just like said,
yeah,
because I have these lights
settings.
Well, yeah, because it's like I have the I have my home system, so my actual studio lights I can do that with.
Okay.
And technically, I think I can get this light on Wi-Fi. I just haven't hooked it up yet, so I probably should do that.
Okay.
Because if I could get both of those hooked up,
that would be legit.
I might be able to actually get that hooked up to my Steam Deck or my Stream Deck. So
Are you serious?
I think I can actually. I haven't thought about that, and I literally just now realized I can do that because those are on Wi-Fi. That is Wi-Fi capable. I've just never bothered putting it on Wi-Fi.
Really?
But it's literally all right on the back. It shows the Wi-Fi signal, so it's like I can easily hook that up to my Wi-Fi. Those are already hooked up, and my Stream Deck, since it's already hooked to the computer, can control anything hooked up to the Wi-Fi. Like it already has it built in to where I can control the lights if I wanted to.
Kind of baller.
So I should probably set that up one of these days now that I'm thinking about it. What is going on, chat? How are you doing?
Welcome, everyone.
When is Cosmic's next item going to be reviewed?
Oh,
it has been a minute since we've had a Cosmic item.
It's been a little bit, but again, we've had such a diversity of submitters.
We really have, yeah. And we've had a lot of new submitters too.
It's really cool to see all the different people and the way they think about bringing these homebrews into the world. So I'm here for it. But
yeah, can you check? Yeah, check on the schedule. Let's see when Cosmic's up next. And Stardew Valley. I have seen it be played. My wife Vixie plays it quite a bit. I don't think I've ever actually. I don't own the game, so I don't think I've ever actually played. I've watched her play it. I may have taken over the controls and just tried to see like what's what, or walked around like her farm. And I've watched a couple of YouTube videos, but yeah, no, I don't play Stardew Valley, and I haven't played Stardew Valley.
Interesting.
It's not my kind of game. It seems very chill. It seems definitely like a very awesome game.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong about it. It's just not my vibe. You know, it's not the game that I would relax to. It's
fair enough.
You know, it's just one of those games that as cool and interesting and as chill and vibey as it seems, at the end of the day, I wouldn't be able to play more than like 20 minutes before I'm just like,
what am I doing?
What am I doing with my time? Like, it's not a game. Happening? It's not a game that feeds me like the idea that I'm like doing much. I don't get. That's why it's like survival games.
From it.
Yeah, exactly. Like survival games that are like grindy, where you have to, like every time you log in, you have to go spend like an hour or two chopping wood and getting furs and meats, and it's like when games are focused on that, I'm like, by the time I have a finite time of gaming, right? I don't play for 8 hours a day.
Fair enough.
So if the game's going to require me 45 minutes to 2 hours to do one thing just to be able to play the game, that's like 90% of my time already. I'd much rather log into a game that's just straight into here's the game, start playing. So that's why it's very, very difficult. Not that I dislike, I love like Rust. I love Rust. Rust is such an amazing game. But my
That is
biggest
true.
problem is I cannot input the idea. I can't play every day. So the idea that every time I log in, I have to first go and grind for materials just to keep my base up.
Yeah.
Just to not lose
Just to
the things
not
I've already
die.
gained. I already have to spend the majority of my playtime doing that. And then
Yep.
then I can switch to doing the things that I want to do. But the downside is I've already invested so much time. If the things I want to do end up bad, like let's say I want to go and take a monument and I want to go to, let's say, like, power plant. If that first run doesn't go well and I just like get a bad like situation with some scientists, or I get, crossfired by another team, if I've already put 3 hours into the game and I only got like another hour left and like 5 minutes into me doing what I wanted to do, it goes really bad. It's going to be very hard for me to want to regroup and
Start
burn
all
another
over.
45 minutes. When I'm like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's my problem. Not that that's an issue with the game. It's just
That's that type of gameplay. And
exactly.
it can't.
It's not that I need a rewarding game. I don't need an easy game. I don't need a game that I'm good at. It's just that the time that I put into a game, I need to feel is progressive, not maintainative
Yes.
or maintaining, right? Like with Rust, it wipes every month. So every time I log in, if it's not daily, is primarily to upkeep anything I've already built. Then I have a very minimal time to upgrade and do what I want, right? Whereas I could go play like even some RPGs don't feel very rewarding unless there's like I don't play a lot of RPGs because they're just even though there's good stories, it
Yeah.
takes so long to get through the story because you have to grind, you have to, like Elden Ring. Elden Ring seems really, really cool. Sounds like a really awesome storyline, especially for DMs like us.
Yes.
I can imagine everything I've heard about it sounds fascinating, but then I realize you get like one piece of the story and then 15 hours later you get the next piece. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but again, when I only have a couple hours a day or a week to play,
Yeah.
I can't burn 3 months just trying to put together 2 pieces of the story of a 50-piece story. Like I can't spend
I'm
that.
gonna be here for.
I'm not going
eternity.
to. I don't want to play I'm not going to play 2 years because in 8 months' time, my interest is going to change. I'm not going to want to play this.
Sure.
So that's my problem with those kind of grindy games. Is as much as I completely respect them for what they are, I just don't have the time to be able to enjoy them.
Yeah, that's
You know
fair.
what I mean?
And there's some streamers out there that can do this like every day of their life, and they're spending so much of their time like investing into those things. So
Mhm.
those things can work for them. Like if
And-
that's
And that's where I get my enjoyment,
Yeah.
where watching someone else who's really good and have already put in, 1,000 hours into the game, and then they do a speed run or they do like a run where in 2 hours they can show you the entire story and they can
Mhm.
actually show you how it progresses and how it matters. That's something that I would watch, right? I've learned enough from Elden Ring from watching these like little snippets of like of parts of videos, but I just would never be able to have gotten all of that by playing because I simply do not have 1,000 hours.
yeah.
And it's not the 1,000 hours of that's how big the story is. It's the 1,000 hours of being able to survive long enough to get the next piece.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but I just don't have the memory. If I'm playing something for 10 hours and then I get the next piece of the story, I've already forgot what the first part was.
Unless you bring it into my forefront, unless you're showing it to me, unless we're walking through this storyline together, like it's gonna be a background thing. It's gonna
Exactly.
be just combat, don't die, combat, don't die.
I'm not a big Souls like fan, but I did end
I've
up
tried
buying
it.
Sekiro. I bought Sekiro, which is a Souls like,
Okay.
like it's not necessarily Dark Souls, but it's very similar. Has had a really cool storyline, but
Mhm.
again, the grind. After a while, I had literally restarted the game like 5 times simply because by the time I got to the next part, I had absolutely forgotten what I was doing and what the story was and why it was. I had forgotten everything. So I would restart knowing that I had the skill set to get to that part.
Mhm.
So I would restart, like, oh, okay, that's the intro. Oh, now I remember. Get to the next part, be able to, breeze through it, get the next story, be like, oh, that's what that meant. And then
Yeah.
get to the next part and be like, oh, and there's another 10-hour grind. And I would grind and grind. And then I'd finally get to another part of the story and I'd be like, wait, what? And then I would restart because I'm like, I literally don't understand why this is important. And it's like, this is again, not a problem with the game. It's a problem with just, this is not the kind of thing that I want, which is why if anybody watches me on the weekends, this is why I play things like Rocket League.
Sure.
Because good or bad, no matter how I'm playing that day, Rocket League is always progressive.
Yeah.
Because I play competitive, I'm always working on the same skill sets. And my skill sets, while I could get rusty, my skill sets don't really tarnish. The same skill sets apply because the game is the same. It's just the different people that I'm facing and the different ranks that I'm progressing through, right? I could spend 10 hours, and even though I may not have ranked up a lot, I got a lot of training out of it, right? I got a lot of valuable skills.
And that's what I mean with like you're talking about like actually getting something from the game. Like some games are like meant to entertain you, right? But other games I feel are like meant to train you. Like even like 2-player fighting games like Tekken or like Dead or Alive or something like that. Like a lot of the times, like especially if you get good on like a specific game and like that's your game, if you always come back to it, like you can go in tournaments and like just still wreck, But
exactly,
it's very interesting.
And that's my thing is like, yeah, there are a lot of great RPGs that are out there. I can no longer enjoy them simply because as brilliant as they are, they just demand far too much time.
I think weirdly feel like some game designers like that's what they want. They want to see how much time they can get out of you. Like if they can really get um like they want you to be playing their game forever. They want to be able to say people have put so many thousands of hours into my game.
Well, and they have to make it worth it, right? Like they have to justify the price, which is hilarious because it's like,
I mean, all games are the same outrageous price to me. I'm like, God, can I get a $20 game? Like, I feel like I used to be able.
I don't mind a 60-hour game, but I don't mind a 60-hour game only taking 40, 50 hours to beat. But some people think that like there's a lot of the mindset that that's not enough. But some of the best indie games that are out there, are 10 hours or less, and they're still like game. It's very interesting, the idea of what players and what people think is supposed to be a good game. But again, it's now about profit. So between profit and microtransactions, what are you going to do? Like literally they have to put in as much stuff to keep you in the game, and then they have to keep you somehow putting more money into that game.
I feel like they do the same thing with anime sometimes. Like people don't appreciate the shorter, like complete anime rather than the ones that go on for a million seasons. I'm like, yes, I know it's cool and you want more and you want them to upgrade and Super Saiyan 1,000,000, but like sometimes something that's just finite has some unique quality that I really appreciate.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's kind of like the reason why I never got to finish Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate is such a brilliant game.
Oh,
but there's just so much that like
you can get lost in it.
Well, it's like you want to be able to do everything, and because it's a video game, you can pretty much do everything. But it's that same function of you're gonna miss stuff if you try to keep up with just one of the storylines and just try to like make sure that you're going through it fast enough to like remember it. But at the same time, you're gonna miss a lot. But then if you try to do all of the things, it just becomes a convoluted mess of side quests, main quests, and out of place stories, right? And that was kind of the biggest thing. And then it has the idea that you could like replay it, but I'm also not one to be able to enjoy replaying a game if the story is exactly the same. Like Baldur's Gate, sure, I could play it a million different ways, but I have no interest in the story if it's the same exact one. It's the same choices, it's just a different choice, right? But overall, I just wouldn't be able to care because eventually it would just become, a meme at that point, right? It would just become, I wouldn't be invested. Kind of like what we've talked about in terms
Yeah.
of it's
It's
almost like
no
I can
longer gonna
plan
be
too
about going
far.
through the story anymore. It's just gonna be about like, "Oh, what else can I get through in this? What else can I find? What else can I discover? What
What
else
I
can
was
I
gonna get away
collect?"
with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I know that that's just a personal preference, but when it comes to
No, I
games,
get it.
I have to have
I
a little
get
bit
it.
more fast paced, and not even fast paced. I just have to have things that I feel that when I play it, I'm not just sinking time in and not getting some sort of reward from. Like again, if
Yeah.
it's super grindy and it's just to maintain, I can't find pleasure in just maintaining where I was at a month ago or a week ago, right? Every time I play, I have to feel like I've gone at least a step forward.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I feel that.
But hey, everybody has their preferences, and there's a game for everybody.
That is very true. That is very true.
And that's one of the reasons why I am trying to do a little bit more game streams because I'm hoping that um, it will push me to try more games.
Okay. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think if I'm doing it for stream, I'm more likely to try a game that otherwise I wouldn't have bought.
Yeah. That's fair.
So that's why I'm kind of just listening to chat and seeing what people suggest over time. Because if I get something suggested enough, I'll end up getting it.
Yeah.
And even if I don't enjoy it, at least I will have the experience of having tried it.
Did you ever try out, cuz I remember one that was suggested, that Marvel Rivals. Did you ever actually
Yes,
do
I
that
do
one?
have it actually. I've played it a couple times, and I did do a first impressions run through of it.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. I think it just needs a little bit of time to
Okay.
become like amazing, but I also need a better PC for it. It is literally
Uh,
that was even though it's a free to play, that was the official like decision or the official signature that I need a new PC.
okay.
Like that
Fair enough.
it's the first like modern game that at its lowest settings still doesn't look good. Like I can play plenty of like other what more modernized games at
Mhm.
low settings and it still looks fine and my computer's fine with it. It's either that my computer struggles or it looks like trash.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, it's definitely time to take it serious that I need a new PC. But that'll be also good because if we get what we want this year and get an editor, it'll be
Oh,
a lot
yes.
nicer to
Yep.
have recordings instead of just downloaded YouTube videos because of the compression.
Yeah.
So with that, a new PC will also allow me to actually record alongside live streaming.
Oh, very cool.
So then that way we'll actually have proper high definition recordings for editing purposes, and then I can just invest in a memory stack of some sort. Just
Oh, okay.
just a memory bank so I can just store all
All
of that.
the
'Cause it's gonna
all
be
the
a lot.
things.
It'll be a lot, but hey, that's long term plans.
Fair enough.
Did we ping Marty?
Let me do that right now.
Because I don't know if Marty knows that this is their
I
Monday.
do know they mentioned it to me, I think it was last week. They wanted me to make sure that I got the most recent updates, uh, that they sent. They actually sent it a good long while ago, so this has been squared
Okay.
away for a while, but, yeah, let me hit up Marty.
Just to give him a chance. Want to give everybody a chance to see their review.
They
Sold with a
are
6,000. Oh, so you found a way to get around the 2,000 limit, I see.
wait, what happened?
Oh no, that's the third time you've done
Oh, that's
2,000.
total.
So that's total, not all at
Okay.
once. That's fine. I kind of like that there's the 2,000 limit. I'm thinking I'm gonna have to up it. I mean, look at this. We're already at 10,000. It's only the second stream. You see
Goodness
what I mean? You see
gracious.
why I upped it?
People are excited,
It's gonna have
man.
to.
I don't
I'm
know
gonna
what to
have to
tell
up it to
you.
20,000. I'm just
They
saying.
want another they want another what do you call it? Pop culture build.
Yeah, we'll
That's
see.
my guess.
Yeah,
That's my guess.
I have a feeling it's either gonna be pop culture build or it's gonna be a bartending stream.
Oh, yes.
because
That
there's been a
also
lot
might
of
be
talk about a
true.
bartending stream, and I
And
did just get the major update to the bar.
yes, that lighting, how beautiful is that?
The lighting, I have so much more alcohol. I have all of the mixers, and I have my official bar kit now. So
Yes.
I
Oh, you do?
yeah, I have the official bar kit now. So
Very nice.
yeah, no, I'm officially set up in there. I
That's
just need
the
the bar
business,
table
dude.
and the pool table, and we once again mapped it out, and it's gonna be enough room to hold the actual gaming table
Is it?
that I have in mind. We've already mapped it out, so it's like I just gotta get that
so
and the
excited.
bar table.
I'm so excited, dude. This is gonna be business, man. This is gonna be the business.
Exciting. Well, we have 10,000 raised, only 5,000 to go for February's community stream. I have a feeling that it will only be 1 or 2 more streams, and that'll be locked up.
That's gonna be it.
Marty, there you are. Okay, you have
Welcome.
arrived in time because we haven't started yet.
Excellent.
All right, so now that Marty is here, let me just abuse my microphone. All right, so
not to belabor, but you did ask me a question before we got on that tangent that we were on. You asked me, when is Cosmic's next submission?
Yes, when is Cosmic's next submission?
It is next.
It is next Monday.
He is next Monday.
All right, what are we reviewing next Monday?
Next Monday we are reviewing for Cosmic. Open. The Jurisdiction of Apotheca. This is a focus item.
Ooh, an arcane focus.
An arcane focus.
Of Apotheca. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if it's going to give bonuses to like potion making.
Interesting. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's the first instinct that I have is like, is it going to benefit potion makers, or enchanters? Yes, something to do. I mean, obviously apothecary is like, I just go to the idea of herbalist or potion maker. So curious what that's going to bring us. Well, there you go, Cosmic. You will be next Monday.
Indeed.
The Norse races. Okay, Marty, if you have some Norse races, I'm actually really curious what that means.
Ooh.
What does that? What does that even mean? Norse races. I'm really curious. I mean, you're talking about like a Viking race, like that would be interesting. Actually,
if there were like different tribes, had different like
small side tangent here. What do you guys think? Would Vikings, like D&D wise, would Vikings be like a race or a class?
Would Spartans be a race or a class?
I mean, I can kind of see an argument for both, especially with 5th edition rule sets. Like, I like specifically, I would think more of the race just due to it's more of a cultural thing. But from the mechanical standpoint, I can kind of also see it being like a class.
I mean, theoretically, yes. Okay, how about this?
Depends on how stereotypical you get.
Why not both?
Why not both? I mean,
why not create a race and a class that are Spartans? So you could be a Spartan, or you could be a human Spartan.
Because that's the thing, like with Spartans specifically, I think that's more of a class because it's like, or even a background, right? Because you had to train to do that. With Viking, you can either be of like Viking heritage, and then just, model your character after it. But I'm thinking like what you stereotypically think of a Viking, right? As in like how they do things and how they would be in combat. It makes me think of a class. Because the types of weapons you would use, like axe shield or sword shield, and the more aggressive nature of it, having like, I would think of as a class, I could think of a Viking class as like a cross between either a fighter and a barbarian or a monk and a barbarian, like kind of what's the in between, not quite rage, but not quite key focus. It's this battle sense, almost like a whole class based on like a battle sense where it's a semi rage, but you don't get like empowered from the rage. You get better like understanding of the battlefield kind of thing. So, you know what I mean? And you can also get like more benefits from team positioning. Because in a sense of like attacking with a group. You actually have like imagine giving
pack tactics.
Imagine giving a class their own version of pack tactics, but as a PC, right? So
That would be
I can
wild.
understand like you could make the argument for a race, but I'm thinking if you did a few tweaks, you could also make either of those a class. Interesting. Maybe we should try that.
I think that's not
Maybe
a bad
we
idea.
maybe we should try that on a Friday. Is make those like I could see that. I like the idea of because I'm trying to think any group that not necessarily did military mobilization, but any group that you know typically mobilized in small groups would be good to focus a class or base a class off of and incorporate that pack tactics idea because there's a lot of different types of backgrounds that we could pull from other than Viking for that.
Yeah,
But just that idea of making a class that has a player character version of pack tactics.
I like this a lot.
I think we need to try something like this.
I like this a lot.
Uh, let's see.
So
Norse mythology. So already, oh, so we've already gotten one of the Norse races apparently. So it's all just going to be based on Norse mythology. I'm really curious how that's going to work out. Um, and Cosmic's thinking that the Viking might be a class or a subclass specific to a barbarian fighter multiclass.
a specific, would it tell you when to take a level in one or the other?
Yeah. You know, that's actually an interesting concept. It's way too it would be way too complicated for them to make like a booklet out of, but that is kind of interesting to make like a custom subclass based off of a multiclass.
Right.
Because realistically, you don't get that, right? You only have to basically juggle two subclasses. But it would be really interesting to be able to like work in a subclass that kind of is built for a multi-class, like from a multi-class.
Yeah, I do think that's very interesting, especially like how you would outline your level progression as you go through whatever it is to optimize whatever this subclass brings. That would be very interesting. That would be very interesting.
You know, I mean, what you could do is easily make some rule sets of by this level, you must like, so, you know, it would either state which one you had to start with, or it would allow you to choose. And then it would then so the first rule would be whether you could choose which one to start with, or it would identify which one you had to start with, right?
Mm,
For the subclass that you're choosing. Then it would have to say, here is by this level, so no later than this level do you need to take a level in the second class. So it may give you till level 4, so
mhm,
immediately as soon as you can, you need a multi-class into it, or it may say by level 7.
mhm.
Doesn't matter, you know. So it may have these rule sets of first it identifies if you know which one you start with, then which level you have to start multi-classing in, and then it would have to specify they cannot be this far apart. So if you only need one level, it could basically say as long as you take the second one by level 8 and you don't need to take any others, you're fine. But if it's a by level 5 you need to take the second one and they can no longer be more than 4 apart. That means every time you level up, you have to like either get them closer
Mm,
or, you know, piggyback them. You know, bring the one up and then go forward, then bring the one up and then go forward. So
interesting.
it would have to be like that. You'd have to tell the subclass would just have to tell you a rule set of this is the bare minimum in order for this subclass to work.
Right.
But that's why it would be too difficult to lay that out in a book without basically telling people this is exactly what you have to do.
Right.
For that to be organic, it's a cool idea, but it would be kind of bland. Well, I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't be that bland. In 5th edition rule set, I could see you choosing a certain subclass. And if it says, okay, take Bard for 3 levels, take Fighter for 2 levels, and then from then on go Bard Fighter, Bard Fighter, Bard Fighter, Bard Fighter. If it just said that, and then that's how this, and then
And
the
then whenever
subclass
you
worked,
gotta level up, that's what you gotta level up in.
and yeah, and the subclass just worked off of that exact
That's
pattern,
what I was thinking.
that actually wouldn't be a bad way to work it. If it literally just, yeah, if it just told you exactly how to do it, I think people could go with that. Because most people, again, they
Right.
build from the top
And then
down.
you're just like you'll see what you'll get at each level, and you'll see how this will power this up, and it'll like talk about how when these two things, when you can finally do them together, it becomes this special thing that is this subclass or whatever the case may be. You know, so like it's got potential. You can mess around with it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Let me get this points out of here.
Points out of
Hecate has a question for you.
Question for me. Did I decide on which one yet? Are you asking me which subclass I want to go first? Because that's what I'm assuming you're
Oh, from
asking
the
me.
samurais.
That's what I'm assuming. And
Gotcha.
no, I have not gotten that deep yet. Like I said, I'm still debating whether I even want to read it beforehand or not. But I do want to. I'm so very excited to see what this looks like when I do actually start converting it over. I just got it. When was it? When did you submit this? Was it yesterday? Today?
I know it was recently because I only
Yeah.
got the notification recently and just happened to see the
My
name on it.
goodness.
I usually ignore them, but just for whatever reason, I looked at that and I'm like, oh, that's that one.
Yup.
Okay.
Yup. I'm like, so excited. I'm so excited.
All right. Well, let's get on with it now that everybody is here. Let's
Yes,
look
indeed.
at this new race from Marty the Fearless, the Faras Alnahr. I think that's how I pronounce it. I don't know. Let me know if I've mispronounced that. But this is I guess a hippo humanoid
Yes.
based
Yes,
off of
indeed.
just the image and the little brief thing that we got before. So let's see what we get here with the description. The Faras Alnar are the most feared species in the land. I'm not actually surprised. Hippos are absolutely fucking terrifying.
Yes.
Not for their tempers, but for their size. Most Alnar are calm and collected, seen as traveling merchants. Some, however, harness their size and inner rage to become devastating soldiers or mercenaries. Most species have learned to avoid Alnar and not to anger them. The hippopotamus. This is interesting because I know we're only getting one, but it's really giving me the vibe that this is like not necessarily that there needs to be sub races, but I'm really interested to see a whole party, but of a different
All from
of a
different
different
like
class,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because that's what it's kind of giving me that vibe of is some are calm, some are traveling merchants, but then some are barbarians, some are monks, like just this
Yeah,
idea
yeah,
that you're gonna
exactly.
have this entire society. I kind of like that, and I'd like to see almost like a whole party of just like
That would be
versions
kind of
of
sick.
this, right?
That would be kind of sick.
All right, and then what do we got here for this image? All right, I do like the regalness of this. This is actually a really nicely done, um, like a humanoid morph,
Representation.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of the times I'm really unhappy with just like a lot of times it's either super lazy and it's just like a human body with a morphed head,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then other times it just the proportions are not well done. It just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, it just doesn't quite give off. It gives off the humanoid more than it does the animal.
Yeah.
I really like how this one's done. The proportions seem exactly how you would want for the anthropomorphization of this.
Yeah. The
Like
feet size, even the fingers.
and just
Yeah.
the stoutness of it. Like
Uh-huh.
I'm getting I'm I forget what it was from, but I'm getting like this would be a giant with dwarfism. Like like the idea of like how giants had their own version of dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
So to them they're tiny, but
Oh.
to us they're still
Yeah, yeah,
massive.
yeah.
I'm kind of thinking like this is that mindset of to a giant this would be a dwarf of their own kind.
Right, right, right.
But to us, I could imagine this being what, like 8, 9 feet tall right here, possibly up to 12 feet tall. Like I could see this thing being just absolutely colossal.
That's gonna be scary.
I could
That's gonna be
imagine that
scary.
that is not a large musket, but or a blunderbuss. I can imagine that's an actual cannon. Like literally in my head, I can
Right?
imagine that thing is literally holding just a straight up artillery cannon
That would be
without
kind of
wheels.
baller if they had some like specialized weapons that these guys were like the only ones that could really carry.
So I'm really curious because we haven't seen it yet, but I'm just curious. Like for me, I would not mind this thing being huge. Like if this race was just already huge, I could kind of see it. But what I would
That
almost
would be
do
wild.
is I would exchange the 2x2 for the huge size to a one by
Do you mean
two
large?
or large.
Okay.
So give it large and exchange the 2x2 for a 1x2, but give it the height. So again,
Oh,
to you, this thing is massive. Again, like two blocks tall. So it's you only get like the width but you know, so you get basically
No, I
like
see what you're saying. Yeah,
2 squares instead of 4 squares. That's kind
yeah,
of what I would be thinking for this. Because yeah, that would just be I mean, again, imagine that dagger being like a longsword. But to it's just it's that you know what I mean? Like, I could
too thick.
imagine so much interesting things with the different sizes of this thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so moving on.
That's beautiful.
What do we have here? So ability scores. Your constitution score increases by 2, and your strength or dexterity increases by 1. I feel like I get that. I
Yeah.
totally get that. Um, the Alnar reaches maturity at age 20 and can live to 85.
Okay.
Not
Humanish lifespans.
humanish lifespan. I would have expected longer. Not elven lifespan,
Sure, sure.
but I would have expected maybe like 150.
Hmm.
You know,
Okay.
like I definitely would have expected a little bit longer of your standard lifespan, but you know, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Not really that upset. Um, the alignment. The Honor are a species of many colors. They spend every alignment, making them unpredictable. So very much freedom to play it as you
Very much
wish.
like you were talking about. Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Your size is large.
Very nice.
You normally stand between 8 and 10 feet and normally over 800 pounds. So absolutely, but I as a DM would decree that you don't take up 4 squares, you take up 2 squares.
Okay. That's fair enough.
You know, just to give a better proportion of
I will say, like, even you and I, we don't take up a whole 5 foot cube. So like we are also taking up a little bit more than we truly represent. So
Mhm.
maybe that's just their reach, so to speak. Like just like their like but I do get like I wouldn't want to put this on par with something like what else is large?
um
Um
I'm thinking of something like the like the scorpion or the spider race.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
The arachnids, like
Giant
I
scorpion.
could totally understand them taking up that whole area, or again, a creature like this on all fours. You know, it's big, it's
Right,
bulky in
right,
all
right.
directions, but again, looking at the image and thinking of like the more anthropomorphized version of what's going to actually work with that body mass,
Fair.
it's going to be more of a rectangle than it is a square.
Okay.
In just
And that's
in how I would think it, and
I get
I
that.
think it also adds a spice to the way it's played because again, it's great to adjust with the sizes and it's nice to play with the sizes,
Mhm.
but it gets kind of boring, like what we've talked about before in terms of like a creature can be longer than it is wide. So why not mess with those if you're going to do a
Oh
BBEG?
yeah,
Why
like
not
we were
make
talking about
something?
the what snake was that? Oh, the snow serpent.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
were talking the
exactly.
snow
Like
serpent.
being
Yeah,
able
yeah.
to like make it have different shapes, different sizes, and not just take up the standard block size that is something.
Yeah.
Or again, a BBEG is so large it takes up 3 different zones because it has 3 contact points.
Yes.
So it's like
Yes.
something like that where if something's so large, why does instead of saying it takes up 10 by 10, say it takes up a 4 by 4 over here, a 4 by 4 over here for its feet,
Mhm.
and then a 4 by 4 over here and a 4 by 4 over here for its front legs,
Mhm.
right? Like that's better than doing a 10 by 10.
I very much imagine like that's what the AT-AT walkers felt like back in the day when you were like looking at them from underneath. Like there are contact points. We're literally flying between your legs, like getting that kind
Yeah.
of mentality for general real size that's going on around you.
So yeah, I could absolutely see. I'm glad that this is large, but I
Yeah,
definitely would not mind seeing a plane with
a
the
special
size
version of
alteration.
large.
And again, because with that way, what you can do is in order to make up for it, like you were talking about with reach, right? Like because the 4 by or the 4 squares just means that you have a much larger reach than the average person, right?
Correct.
Um,
Bless.
But what would be nice about this is if you basically took that 4 squares but went vertically of it, you can basically say anything that's 15 feet off the ground is still within your hitting range because you are taller than everybody else.
Yes,
So your 5 foot reach
that's
isn't just
very
right above
fair.
your head; it's above everyone else's
That's
head.
very fair.
So,
I actually kind of like that.
so that's what I'm thinking is you could take that 4 by 4 that just hits all the way around it, put it vertical, but now it has the dome to where it can hit things that aren't flying high enough. And anything that wants to hit something on the ground has to be at least within 15 feet because even if it has reach.
I would even allow something like you know how what's the ability? I'm pretty sure it's flyby. where they can like don't provoke opportunity attacks when they
But
try
you
to
would
fly
on
by, but
this
you would because
100%.
you've got more reach on them.
Because you're actually in your zone and not out of
Hmm.
reach, right? You're actually in their area, and that's what I'm thinking with this one. Is I want to play more with adjusting people's perspective of what you visually represent, which versus what's actually happening.
Yes.
And this is kind of one of the reasons why I prefer theater of their mind with minimal maps and minimal drawings,
Yeah.
because you get to, I feel it makes you think more about what is possible, versus the more you have to look at, the more you feel like that's all there is.
Right. Right. Right.
And that's
No,
kind
I
of
feel
what I
that.
want to like inspire about this is large is a great size, but it doesn't have to be flat. It doesn't have to be on a 2D plane.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
bring that vertical and think of the fact that you can now have reach in a vertical space. That makes you
Yes.
great for like what you said. Flying creatures, if they have a way to like counter it, perfect use of that.
Yeah. 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 Okay. No, I'm here for that. I'm definitely here for that.
Speed, your movement speed is 25 and you have a swim speed of 40. I fucking love that diversity. I love that absolute difference. I am so here for it. Don't mind having the speed
Yeah.
dropped. I think only dropped by 5 is appropriate in this one. I think a lot of the times large creatures get too much of a drop.
Yeah. Yeah.
This one makes actually a lot of sense because they still are pretty fucking fast,
Hmm.
even for their
And because
size.
they're bigger, like you know, they got not necessarily longer legs, but
Right. They got,
they can cover more space with shorter distance.
yeah. So I'm okay with that. And the swim speed is absolutely great. I think that's more than
Oh, yeah.
deserved.
Those guys are
Um,
monsters in the water.
so that's perfect. Uh, tusks. Your tusks aren't just for show, but deadly weapons. You replace a melee attack with a bite attack. I like the idea that you replace it. That's interesting. This attack is considered an unarmed strike. You use strength modifier for the attack and damage. When you hit with this attack, you deal 1d6 plus your strength modifier piercing. So I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. How do you like the actual attack itself?
Hmm.
How do you feel about it replacing a melee attack? Is it as in, because I mean this is a playing character, right? It's not a creature. If you thought of it as a creature, you'd think of it being able to like do a stomp attack and a bite attack. But this is basically saying that instead of punching, you can bite.
I would say I'm pretty confident with the terminology is meant to imply that you replace an attack on your turn with this attack, and it counts as an
It's
unarmed
interesting,
strike.
and for me, it's very interesting because to me, that's just very interesting language. Not that it's wrong, especially if it's for fifth edition. For
Hmm.
me, it just sounds weird to have to identify that because I don't know why you, because it's a race, why it wouldn't just say you can attack with your bite, or
You have a
you
bite
can
attack now.
you can do a bite attack. Like, it's just very interesting
I
to
see what you're
see
saying.
that this is what fifth edition's language is, because for me, it would make more sense to just say, you know, your touch just aren't for show, but a deadly weapon. Um, on your turn, you can,
Make a melee
yeah,
attack with
yeah,
your
you can make a
teeth.
bite attack, as a melee. It's just interesting that it says you may replace a melee attack.
Right.
Why not just say you can
Fair
make a
enough.
melee attack? It's
Fair enough.
just, yeah, nothing to do against you, Marty. I'm just learning weird aspects of fifth edition's
They
language.
do a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, very
It's
interesting. Hippos are scary fast. Yeah, just in
yeah.
general. That's what I'm saying. I do not mind it being 25 and 40. That makes absolute sense. Um, let's see. You can swing your sword. Oh, so wait, this can be technically a multi attack. That's the way it's meant to. Oh, so yeah, I definitely wouldn't use the word replace, because that means to me that you are, instead of doing your melee attack, you do a bite. Um, I would. I mean, if
Oh,
you're,
so this is like an attack that you can add on to
this
another
is just
attack.
almost a free attack that you just, as this race, get to do. That's interesting. Now, I'm not against that idea, but I don't know if I am not personally against that idea. I don't know if fifth edition would be okay with that, because that means that any class you choose, you basically get a free attack. That's what if I'm reading what Marty's saying
Yeah,
correctly.
you're instantly doubling your action economy. You get extra attack at first level.
Yeah, you always get a free attack. So if that's the case, I'm not against it. I don't know if fifth edition would accept that.
It would definitely be a hard ask from a race. I don't think I've seen anything that's quite that. Um,
Okay, so so Marty said it's meant to say you replace one of your extra attacks with this bite attack.
yeah, so like if you have multi attack, if you have
Like
two,
if
if
you're
you
a fighter,
even you're already
any
a
of your
fifth
attacks.
level and you
Okay.
have two attacks, you can replace one of them with this bite attack. That I get.
So I think the easier terminology would just say that your tuskers aren't for show, but a deadly weapon. Um, you may make a uh, bite attack as a melee attack,
Yes.
and then this attack is considered an unarmed strike, and just continue. Because if you just say you may make a bite attack, or you may make, just say instead of you may replace, just say you may make a melee attack uh, with your bite, or something along that lines. Because that's basically the same thing as just saying that if you take
It's
the
a
attack
new
action,
attack that you have
yeah,
available in your repertoire.
um, or just say that you may, you may make a bite attack with your attack action, and then
Yeah.
at that point, that just it just covers all of those bases. I think that would be the better wording. But other than that, no, I think that's great. I think the idea that just instead of swinging your sword, you can bite, and if you
Mhm.
happen to have multiple attack, then you can do both,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because just like again, you're just basically just saying that any one attack, you can do that, and you might want to say like maybe I'm assuming you mean once per turn. Like if you had multi attack, I don't think you mean you could have two bites.
Yeah, that would be
So maybe the idea is that you can once per turn, you can make a bite attack as a melee attack. Would just be the perfect way to
you can
word
make
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So that's yeah. So having issues with wording it. If you're a monk, it's an unarmed strike. Yeah. So I think the only thing that you need to say or change is instead of saying you replace a melee attack, just change this one sentence to say once per turn. Your tusks aren't just for show, they're but a deadly weapon. Once per turn, you may make a bite attack with your attack action.
Yeah.
And then you just follow it up. It's considered an unarmed strike. Use your modifier, you get the bonus damage.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that covers it. Once per turn, one of your attacks. That basically is how it words. It reads is once per turn, one of your attacks
That
can
would
be a
be
bite.
wild as adding that in as a monk.
Yeah.
One of your unarmed strike. Maybe you use that as your flurry of blows move, and you grapple somebody that way. As
Right.
one of the subclasses, you can grapple somebody when you are using your flurry of blows.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
That'd be
would
so
say that,
wild.
yeah, that would be so much nicer. And then you also just guarantee that you put in that once per turn. Because I'm pretty sure that that's what we would want.
Yeah, that
Because
would
the extra
100% make the
damage
most sense.
once per turn. One other thing too, that I don't mind because not necessarily for the tusks, but maybe an add-on to this. So you have your tusks, which is a deadly weapon, and you can do the piercing modifier. But one thing that I would also maybe add in, might be too much, but and this might have to do something like on a long or short rest, just to give it um, a little bit of extra balance, or
Okay.
even tied to say maybe your strength modifier. But I wouldn't mind if part of the tusk attack you had like an add-on of like strong jaw, or like strong bite, where um when you make a bite attack and are successful, once per long rest, once per short rest, or a number of times equal to your strength modifier, you get advantage on a grapple. So when you bite, you can then choose to try to grapple, and then you have advantage on it.
Oh, okay.
But again, it would have to be balanced with some sort of limit.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah.
I don't mind strength modifier. I don't mind a short rest. Those would, especially for, because you're thinking about you're getting this at level 1,
Hmm.
and you're getting it indefinitely with any other class that in features that you have yet to even get.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I want to make it to where it's still kind of balanced, but I could easily also see doing this. And to make it even more balanced, you could say when you use your bite attack, in lieu of, or instead of the 1d6 damage, you can take advantage on a grapple. So you
Okay.
choose when you make your bite attack, you choose do 1d6 plus your strength modifier and extra damage, or have advantage on a grapple.
Okay.
Maybe that's how you word it. You have two options when you do your bite attack, because I kind of like, I'm
Now,
thinking of a
is
hippo.
that extra damage or is that all of its damage?
Use your strength modifier for the attack and damage. When you hit with its attack, you deal 1d6 plus strength modifier. Okay, so that's just the damage, not extra damage.
Okay.
So I would think that maybe, yeah, you would just say you can either bite and do damage or bite and get advantage on
That's honestly a decent trade-off from
just
my
one, just
perspective.
what, because it's a still once per turn. So you only, because there's other
Yeah,
feats that you get to do
especially
grapple
because
once per
if
turn.
you're giving up damage to get advantage to hold on to them, that's fine,
Hmm.
right? And then it's really only helpful because at first level you can get that grab, but you're not going to do any damage to them that turn. So you're giving up doing damage to them that turn
That's
early
true.
on
Yeah, for everybody
to
else's
just
benefit.
hold on to them and like not let them go, right?
True.
And that's cool if you and your party know how to smartly take advantage of that. But other than that, so what?
And
Like,
that can work for a lot of different classes too. Like that, that could, I could easily see that
yeah,
working for more than just a fighter, you know?
definitely,
So
definitely a monk,
interesting. Okay. Yeah. So that's another
probably even a
option
paladin.
is, again, if,
Oh, definitely a paladin.
what's going on with this race with another way to damage things, just a little underwriter. Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting. So yeah, so I would not mind that trade-off of your bite attack either does damage or you get advantage on grapple, because that's also something that at any point in the campaign I could see that being useful, that trade-off.
Yeah,
Especially at later levels, I think the grapple will become way more beneficial than your 1d6 damage.
especially if you are trying to position people because you can drag people when they're grappled. You can do
Oh, and
all
you're
kinds of.
large, so you probably have advantage on
If you're a
dragging.
monk, dude, and you got speed, bro. Oh
Well,
my
and as a
gosh,
DM,
that would be so dirty.
would you say, since it's large, you probably have an advantage on dragging smaller creatures? Don't you already have advantage on grapple against smaller creatures than you?
I don't think so. I don't know where that would be.
Okay, maybe not, but okay. So yeah, so I love the tusks as is, just minus that little bit of a wording change, but I like what it does. I don't think it would be a problem expanding it with the right kind of balance. Like
Agreed.
I don't think
Agreed.
grapple would be a huge issue. Large creatures do have advantage against grapples on smaller creatures.
Do they
Okay,
really?
I always thought that was a thing where, yeah, you have advantage on that kind of
I have to
grapple.
look where that is.
Um, so yeah, that would even be crazier with this one because you're already large. So again, that bite makes sense that your bite basically just gets the advantage, like almost by default.
Yeah.
All right, so you also get river cruising. Alnar are exceptional swimmers, being able to use their buoyancy uh, to bounce from the bottom of rivers and up towards the surface, giving them far more speed. Uh, being acclimated to rivers, they are able to hold their breath for extended periods of time. This allows them to hold their breath for an additional 5 minutes. What is the standard length of breath
It has to do with your constitution modifier.
holding? Okay.
Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Oh, and hippos can actually hold their breath for about 5 minutes. Is that true? Oh, okay. So yeah, so that would make sense that given an extra 5 minutes when a normal hippo can only go about 5 minutes. So having
That's
the
fair
idea
enough.
that you have the wherewithal of, like, the humanoid mind, I could see that. Okay, cool.
A number of minutes equal to their constitution modifier plus one. So if your constitution modifier is a 15, oh, modifier. If
Yeah,
your
so up to a
constitution,
5 or 6,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you'll have that much. So 1 minute plus that much in your cost. So up to 5 is usually about
And you're getting
average.
a plus two out the jump. So say you have a at the very least a plus three in your constitution modifier, and you get a four total because you get a plus one to it.
Hmm.
And then
This is an additional 5 minutes. So yeah, you got
it's an
like 10
addition.
minutes. So
Yeah.
you're gonna be averaging about 8 to 10 minutes underwater with this race. I'm
Okay.
okay with that. Um, yeah, I like the addition because, well, let's see, because I I don't mind the way this is written because this definitely feels like, again, this harkens back to like more of the older second edition feel where there's a little bit
Hmm.
of math involved and there's a little bit of dynamicism. But again, to clean it up for what we know fifth edition likes, I wouldn't mind if this race just gave you a flat time. If it just said 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes.
Oh, you can
If
hold
it
your breath for
if it
X.
just said that by having this race, you can hold your breath for 10 minutes. Because really, outside of that, classes don't really change the way that you can hold your breath. And it's really only going to be your constitution and maybe a couple feats, right?
Mhm.
So at this point, instead of having to do the potential changes in math for only a couple minutes, if you just said 10 minutes, I think game wise for player and DM, I think it
Yeah.
would be cleaner, not necessarily better. I love this because this to me is how I
Yeah.
play. I play with nice dynamic individual numbers and I like to play with those details. But for fifth edition, if you wanted to clean it up, I think just saying by playing this race, you get 10 minutes underwater.
I think 10 minutes is a good time.
It makes it because we just did the math. On average, if you've done your constitution checks and you've bumped your constitution properly with this, you're looking at 8 to 10 minutes average easy. You might get up to 12,
Mhm.
if you really max it out. But realistically, if you just kind of just locked it in at 10 minutes, that gives DMs a very clear cut time frame of how far can you move.
Mhm.
It gives players a very easy understanding of how, it makes the game a little bit easier to progress with
Yeah.
a clear time frame. It also makes it things like, I mean, combat doesn't last that long, but you know what I mean? It makes how you plan things a little bit cleaner.
Mhm.
I love this. I don't suggest any changes, but if you wanted to make it cleaner for high point or for fifth
Just
edition,
a side question, because I think about this. When you're underwater and you're in combat for whatever reason, and you're holding your breath, when you get attacked, when you get hit with an attack, do you have to like make a constitution check or saving
I don't
throw
think in the core rulebooks you do, but I do think you should have to.
to not lose your breath? Like,
Well, and so there's a couple ways that you could talk about this, right? One, you could make a check, and then maybe diminish how long they have underwater. I would totally be okay with that because like you let
mhm.
out some of the breath. Two, you could very easily implement if you aren't able to breathe underwater, you could implement additional damage when characters are having to hold their breath, and this accounts for not even underwater but anywhere.
Mm,
And the way you equate that is what we've talked about. HP is a lot more than just
very
physical
much
damage.
so. Yeah.
So if you're underwater, if you're in smoke or in gas and you're holding your breath, that's strain on your body. You have to hold that in, and taking damage may make you exacerbate and breathe out some of that air, which
Mm,
brings you closer to not wanting to fight.
yeah, yeah.
Because that could mean that you're about to breathe in and start coughing, breathe in and start drowning. Like the idea behind HP doesn't always mean it's physical damage. Just kicking someone in the stomach may not hurt a fighter. You can kick a fighter in the stomach all day long and he's not going to die.
Mhm.
But kick him in the stomach in a burning house when he's trying to hold his breath, that's going to make it a lot harder for him to survive because now he's harder to breathe. It's harder for him to hold his breath
Yeah.
because he wants to cough. He wants to let out something because he got hit. So I do agree with you. There are a couple ways to do it. You can make extra.
Interesting.
I don't mind extra damage if you really want to represent HP as more than just health.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't mind that either.
I don't mind constitution checks to limit how much longer they can hold their breath because that also equates to the same thing. Or um, you just initially just auto decrease it. Just every time you get hit, you just automatically just say that you are now
You go down a set
closer.
amount.
Yeah, you are now that much closer to not being able to breathe. So you could do it a couple different ways. It just depends on how your gaming group envisions things.
That's fair enough.
But I do not believe in a core rule book. It matters. If you get hit, it doesn't care. You're still holding your breath.
Fair enough.
And I
Okay.
think that's the ease of fifth edition. It wants everything to just work.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know,
Sure.
because
Another element of depth that they didn't need to. Another layer. They were just like, eh.
well, because I mean, imagine just again how much they'd have to write for every reason why you like again. So that means they'd have to have a kind of like a rule set for every condition in every way it could be affected. Where otherwise, it's like, look, if you have a condition like holding your breath, it's just on. Like, here's how
Yeah.
long you can do it.
It just
It's
works.
just working. All right. So I do like river cruising. I don't mind that. I really like the calculation. I think the calculation works really great for my gaming style as well as for the way that I think players should be handling their characters. But from a fifth edition mindset, if you just locked it in at a set time, I don't think anyone would argue.
For sure.
I think everybody would just be like, "That's cool." You wouldn't want it
Agreed.
like a half hour. You wouldn't want it to be unrealistic. But if you're gonna basically give them 10 minutes, just give them 10 minutes. makes it a little easier on the DM to handle too.
Yeah.
And then we finally get that's the last one, right? Cushioning bounce. Due to the amount of extra fat, falls don't hurt you nearly as much. You have resistance against bludgeoning damage from falling. You fall at least 10 feet. If you fall at least 10 feet, you can use your reaction to brace yourself and bounce off the ground, landing on your feet. I don't know how realistic this is, but I still like it.
Kind of like it.
I don't mind it because it's just on the side of cute and memey without it being like abusive. You know, it's just on that side of, you know what, for the sake of fantasy, I allow it. You know what I mean? Because realistically, that would not work at all. That would just it would literally just make things worse than it's that much fatter. But let's face it, it's a magical creature in some respect.
Sure.
I'm totally okay with this. It's just on the side of okay because it's just playing with the fact that it's still fantasy, guys. And that's what I like, right? It's just brushing that air of guys, it's still just fantasy. Just I'm not saying that it will never die from fall damage. Let me just squeak by with a bounce. Come on. And I like it. I'm okay with it.
Bounce, man.
Sometimes you got to be reminded that fantasy is just that.
And it's fun.
Exactly. So here's the thing though. You don't take as much. So this says if you fall at least 10 feet, you can use your reaction to brace yourself and bounce off the ground, but it doesn't talk about damage reduction at all.
That's the resistance. You just take half damage.
Oh, you have resist. Okay, so you just take half damage, but no.
So whenever you fall, it's not like you don't take any fall damage. Like a monk can do. This, it's just
you'll take fall damage and you'll land on your feet,
and you have the ability to use your reaction to land on your feet.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't mind that.
The only thing I would think is, specifically from bludgeoning. So if you land on spikes, you're screwed.
Oh, yes.
But I think the only thing that I personally would want to add, not that I think it needs it, but I would put a cap. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be a point at which this doesn't work.
Well, I'll put it this way: at that point, it's not going to matter if it's half.
Well, but that's what I'm talking about, right? Like how much is bludgeoning? Like how much damage does fall damage do?
I think it's like 3d6 for every 10 feet you fall, but it's anything past 20 feet.
Oh, it's only so you get 20 feet free.
I think if you fall from 10 feet, you get 10 feet for free. But when you get up to 20 feet, you're gonna start.
That's the three. Oh, that's the 3D. It's every 10 feet after 10 feet. Right. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
So you start off with the lowest amount of fall damage you can take is 2d6.
Right. I'm just trying to think of like at a certain point you would think that you just take the full amount of damage, and you know what I mean, like that. My mind just says it's like it's just weird to be able to take half of infinite number of fall damage, right?
Yeah.
Like to my mind just says that there's got to be a point at which it doesn't matter. You're just gonna take all of it. But again, I know that's more pedantic, but I think for me, I would probably just cap it at at a max of like 100 feet or 50 feet. Like after 50 feet, you're just taking all of it because you shouldn't survive that, right? But anything under that, I could see you taking an advantage of. So either way, I don't mind it. I think it's cute. I'm totally fine. The bounce is just meant to stop you from going prone. And I've told you, I do not mind at all that you go to your feet. That is totally cool. I don't mind any of this. I think this is really cool. I do think there is one other thing missing though. It's missing from river cruising that I wanted to go back to because this is not what I expected. Also, this was a sleeper damage dealer in the class. Oh, is that the idea of like you could fall on enemies so you could like the idea of the cushioning bounce is you could like fall on enemies and you would take half damage, but they would take the full amount of like bludgeoning damage? Yeah, 800 pounds of just pure force. Oh man, can you imagine if you did become a paladin and 800 pounds of plate with plate armor? Oh man, and then put a shield in front of you, just 800 pounds behind a plate of shield. Yeah, that would be absolute insanity. Um, no, so I really like this. This is well thought out. I don't mind any of it. I do think it could be a little bit more. I definitely think that I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit extra from it, and mainly that's just because I feel like races deserve to add a lot of extra flavor and spice to the gameplay, and doing that through extra abilities that you don't normally see is one of the things that I like to do. When I bring in new players, I really like them to get some custom stuff. And I really think that races have a huge opportunity to be one of those areas that we could add some extra gameplay opportunities, right? Add some extra feats where you're just not going to get them. So,
I'm not mad
um,
at that.
one of the sleeper damage was 800 pounds of just pure force landing on people, and it gets like the half damage. So you're kind of like a bum. And then I was thinking, man, can you imagine a paladin of this in plate armor with a shield just jumping down onto the enemies? Just 800 pounds of.
Why isn't that an attack roll? Why don't I get an attack roll to just like fall in? Because then imagine being able to, as a paladin, divine smite, just falling on someone's head. Just
Well, and
you
it's
land
like,
on them with the power of God.
can you imagine just having like a
God
trample
bless
where
her.
you could just like run through a crowd and knock people prone and
Yes,
then just keep running through
I can
them?
imagine that in a rhino subclass,
Right.
or
I do like the idea of doing it more to a rhino. But speaking of which, so river cruising gives you the extra 5 minutes, right? Because the idea is it's giving you an extra 5 minutes of underwater breathing or of holding your breath.
oh,
That's what it
okay.
does. Because I think it also kind of explains why you have 40 feet of swim. But
Mm-hmm.
the idea being that this river cruising gives you 5 minutes. However, I'm a little upset because it's not what I expected. And now the more I think about it, I think river cruising needs to have an additional ability
Okay.
because holding your breath for 5 minutes isn't, in my opinion, doesn't live up to the name of river cruising. And I also think we're missing a really uh, big benefit here from a large creature in the party that has great buoyancy and that can swim. River cruising should give this a weight capacity so the party can ride it across a river. I think river, because that's what I thought of when I first read river cruising. I'm like, oh, the party on top of it, and y'all get across. But then it was talking about the holding their breath. So what I want river cruising to do is say it can hold up to twice its weight or up to equal its weight above water. So basically, as long as the party isn't above 800 pounds, it can float the entire party above water.
I would say
Or the cart, like the party has to swim, but the cart,
I
it could
would
like.
say yes to the pounds, but I would also limit the number of creatures.
Well, you'd have the size. You'd have like.
Because like if you had like a bunch of
Well,
people that didn't weigh a lot,
if we talked about like you're basically a 4x4 but vertical, but when you're swimming, you'd still only be 4x4 because you're large. So it's only what you could fit on a 4x4.
That's what I would agree.
But still, to be able to trek people across on a weight limit. I think the fact that you are this giant buoyancy thing. When I read river cruising, I'm just like, wait, why am I not able to literally hop on my partner's back and he can take me safely across a river?
Yeah.
Or we could strap the cart to him that's like 600 pounds and he could take the cart across and then we all have to swim or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I kind of want river cruising to literally be he's cruising on the river with the party.
That would be so legit.
Let people ride it. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Let people ride them. So that's what I would say for river cruising is set a weight limit. You know it's already going to be a 4x4 because that's how a large creature would fit horizontally. So just say anything that fits within a 4x4 and set a weight limit. I would say no more than equal its weight. So up to 800 pounds because that's how much this thing weighs. Or no more than 3/4. Like set a proper weight limit enough that you think that you could get 4 party members or a cart or look up in the book what 2 animals are like be able to put 2 horses like what just think about the things that the average people would be transporting and what can fit in a 4x4, average out that weight to where you'll be useful but not like guaranteed nothing will ever stop you.
Yeah.
And that's where I would set that weight limit is just even if it's like 100 pounds extra than its weight limit or it can go up to 1,000 pounds, right? Just figure out what makes sense, and I would cap that because that sounds so fucking cool, right? It's once again one of those kind of like what we talked about where the size, if you go vertically, giving them reach up to like 15 feet in the air. So like
Oh,
flying
yeah, yeah,
creatures,
yeah.
because
Mhm.
again, flying creatures, if their reach is normally 5 feet, that means they have to be like only 5 feet above you, which is hard to hit them.
Mhm.
But then this creature would be able to do that, right? It's a situational but very unique benefit. Same thing with this. The river cruising would be situational because how often are you really crossing bodies of water,
Sure.
in the campaign? But when it does happen, it's that one amazing thing that would actually might push you to take this character if you knew that you were going to be in like marshlands or in watery areas, right?
Yeah.
It's just one of those little tiny things that would make that gameplay feel a little bit more right. And we talked about like, them being merchants, right? How are they taking their stuff across rivers if they're traveling? Imagine the merchant, like imagine you're sitting there on the bank of the river and all of a sudden you're like, you suddenly see what looks like a merchant tent floating along the water. And then it rises up and you see it on the back of a giant hippo.
That would be
And then
cool
it
as
takes it
hell.
off and then you see it stand
That would
up.
be cool as
You know
hell.
what I mean? And then you
That
realize
would be
it's a
cool as
cart and
hell.
the dude's just walking with it like, oh, hello, gentlemen. Would you like to see my wares? Like there's
That would
so
be
much
cool
flavor
as
you could
hell.
have of why they're actually traveling merchants. So
I
I
would like
think that
that a
would be
lot.
my only extra addition to it, just based off of the name and the thing that we never get to see, which is, we get to see people who can breathe underwater, who can swim really well, but who gets to help the party when it comes to water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like you don't ever really get to see that. But otherwise, yeah. I mean there's nothing wrong with it. There's not I mean it's really unique. It really I think hits a lot of good like gaps in what we haven't seen before. In terms of other races that are
I
choosable,
agree.
it doesn't feel OP, but it also feels right at home in the way that you want fantasy to feel at home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this kind of creature walking into the bar, having to like duck down, like the floor just creaks under their 400 pounds. They can't sit on a regular chair. Like there's so much extra nuance to playing this character, right?
Yeah.
And even as a DM, if you're just going to let them walk around and play as normal, that's fine. But imagine, they have to walk into a place. They're giant. They can't go through normal doors. Anything wood's going to creak underneath
Dude,
them. They get on a ship, the ship's going to completely sway if they're not properly like,
I just I
balanced.
just imagine that these group of bandits are rolling around with like a troll or something like that, and they think that they have like the coolest thing ever, and then like everybody that always comes up against them is like, oh, we can beat these little goblins, oh, it's no big deal, and then the troll rolls out and they're like, oh no, we're scared now. And so one day this group of adventurers comes up to them, and it's a bunch of like halflings and gnomes and
Mhm.
whatever and other smaller type creatures, but they don't realize that when they bring out their troll friend and say, "Oh, we got you now," then they bring out their
Yeah.
hippo friend,
They're
and
just
they're
like,
like,
"Excuse me?"
"You got what now?" Oh, it'd be so wild.
Oh, no. Yeah, so I think this is great.
No,
I
for
don't think it needs anything. I mean, again, outside of just fixing up this one sentence, it doesn't need anything, though I would not mind seeing a little bit extra. And that's just because personally, I think races are not underutilized, but I just think that they're underpowered. I think a lot of races just because of how expansive fifth edition got, races have really kept the traditional benefits,
yeah,
sights, maybe like most of them get like dark vision or something like that, and some lore and some background. But I think fifth edition has expanded so much that it kind of forgot that it could have expanded races too.
I love being able to create something that's enticing, right? Like being able to build something that's like, oh, I want to try that. I want to see what that looks like. I want to see if I can bring that to life somehow. Like I love those types of things. That's what this is I feel like is. It's like something that's like where if you were to look at this, it's not just going to be like, yeah, okay, that's another thing that you can do, but like
Right.
this is like, oh, I want to try that. Oh, how would that work? Oh, how would I let me get an opportunity to I think this is very much that. So
Yeah. No, this is fantastic. So yeah, in terms of compatibility, I think the only thing stopping it from really like as written, the only thing stopping it is just those few suggestions that I suggested. I really think that I would give it, some sort of benefit. Well, it already has benefit to smaller creatures with grapple, but I would still put a grapple part into the bite attack, just to
Right.
like I would just really solidify something in the bite attack. I would add the ability to carry while it's swimming in river cruising, and I think that was it. I think those were the only two things. Is just being able to carry people and some sort of grapple. Everything else really works very well. Um, so yeah, it's gonna be a 9 out of 10. I mean, it's basically there. It's just the only thing
Beautiful.
missing is that high point would just have more availability. I just add
Yeah.
more unique customization to the build. So I would just want it to have a little bit extra, but otherwise there's nothing wrong with it. And as written, it I think it would work for almost anybody's scenario. I don't think any setting would have an issue having a player run a large character,
Yeah.
and none of this is game breaking. I mean, I can, outside of the size, I can basically make this by level 2 anyway. Like I can get a +6 extra, extra,
Sure, sure.
it's like I can make a character and choose all the right little things that by level 2 or 3 I have all of this and more.
Mhm.
So starting out with this isn't a problem. Um, I think it just really deserves a good player. I
Yeah.
think that anybody who chooses this just to be large and kind of forgets the nuance to this, I think would be missing out. I think this really
Very much
deserves a
so.
player who would actually get into the fact that they are literally a giant hippo. Like lean into that. I absolutely think that this would absolutely rock under that.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Very much.
very
Very
well
much
done.
agreed.
Thank you so much, Marty. That's phenomenal. I think Marty. What is Marty's average at this point? Because Marty's been like kicking ass recently.
I feel like you're right.
I'm pretty sure with all of the those sub
Oh,
races that we got, I'm pretty sure Marty's like might have the highest at this point.
it's in the upper eights, 8.67.
8.67. Jeez,
Yes.
Marty, good job. That's that's a lot.
Yeah.
um
And that's out of the three races that the two race families and the one race.
yeah, the two race families with like what, three sub races each.
Three, four sub races. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is really good. I'm really liking these. It definitely gives me, it's like I always have stuff like this, like not fully thought out, but it's like these kind of things exist throughout High Point. It's just they're waiting for someone to interact with them for me to fill out the rest, right?
Hmm.
Like I've been inspired to have different regions of different types of races and creatures, and anthropomorphized versions of almost any race will be somewhere in High Point.
For sure.
But I haven't sat down and like
Put together the
every
stats for them.
single
Yeah,
ones,
yeah, yeah.
right? So I see this and I'm just like, this has now inspired me to be like, oh,
What does mine look
it's like
like?
I know that I have like a hippo race somewhere, but I'm like, oh, this is really good. Like that I wouldn't have thought about that, or I haven't thought about that yet. So it's really nice to see these things because it's like I know that stuff will exist at some point in High Point, but
Hmm.
not every little thing has been detailed out. It's more like, okay, there'll be anthropomorphized versions of these creatures, and there'll be a creature of every type from every type of plane, right? So it's like there's every type of creature available to run into, but whether or not I've actually detailed it all out is just really dependent upon what's the likelihood someone's going to see it next. Excuse
Is
me.
that something to unlock? Like if
Hmm.
you wanted to play one of those anthropomorphized races in your world, like could I just be like, "Yo, let me be that," and then that's me interacting with it, and then we create it? Or is
Um,
it like you'd likely have to have seen where they come from, understand what you're asking for when you say, "I'm gonna be one of these," because especially
it
in
really
High
kind of just
Point.
depends. It would depend upon like the rarity and severity, right? Like if you just want to be like certain ones are easier to pull off in terms of what would be more likely to have been able to integrate into society
Mhm.
and likely to have been nearby where you could game with it versus if it's going to be something that is so isolated that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. There might be either an unlock or just kind of a warning of it's a very isolated type of gameplay, right? But for the most part, if especially with anybody who's gamed in High Point for a while, if you have a unique idea, we can probably fit it in. It's just a brand new player probably wouldn't be able to do that. But
that's
if
very
you're
fair.
interested in doing something like that over time, then yeah, most likely we'd be able to fit that in because it's kind of like when you said that you wanted to do, the Old Gods campaign. You gave me an idea and we worked with it.
That's fair.
If someone wants it, I can work with it. It exists in High Point. It's just
How do
how
I deliver?
detailed have I already like thought it through?
Fair enough. Okay, I'm here for that.
Speaking of High
I'm
Point
here for that.
though, I do have some updates on that. So a couple friends of mine have recently reached out and expressed some interest in D&D. Most of them have not ever played,
Okay.
and they've
Oh,
they've
that's
they've heard about it.
right. That's
They've maybe,
right.
I don't know if they've ever seen actual podcasts or anything, but they know about it. They've heard about it. They've expressed some interest in potentially getting introduced to it. So we were kind of half joking about it. So I don't know exactly when and where this will all happen, but it was kind of joked about that, and it was from them, not from me.
For
But
sure.
because they know that we stream, um, they were joking that maybe we should record their first sessions because we could actually get like reactions from absolute non D&D, like, because they have no idea what to expect. They have no expectations. They have
Sure,
no
sure.
prior knowledge. So it would truly be like the perfect representation of not only how my realm works, but we've talked about it. How do I represent? How do I bring new players in? How do I, as a DM, start all of it? And I'm like, they brought it up. So I'm already curious, like how interested they actually might be. But that I think would be a great video series to record, is actually sitting down with people who have never played D&D before and introduce them to High Point.
Yeah.
Just as I did with you, as I did with Vixie, and really get to show off like what is my process and what is my realm, because that's the best way to see it, is without when you play with people who have played, especially in fifth edition, and you try to convert, a lot of it's not necessarily arguing, but a lot of it's reconditioning and lots of questions and a lot of
Hmm.
conflict. Not necessarily negatively, but it's just conflict as in it's not what they're used to. But when someone has no idea what to expect and you just say, here's the rules and here's how it works, and again, coming from me as a DM and from High Point as a setting, most of that is very creative. So when players who are brand new say, can I do this? And I say, yes, instead of saying, well, you can only do it in this exact little tiny box.
Hmm.
And it's more of a, yes, how do you want to do it? And then I just say, well, here's how you can accomplish that. It's not a, but the book says, or, but I've been able to. It's more of a, oh, that's how do I do, it's that explorative of, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have players who want to understand and want to question, but it's also nice to just kind of see it unfold from the player's point of view when they get to truly experience an interactive game
It's
that doesn't have limits.
it's so nice when you experience the yes and policy. When I keep thinking back to, like, everybody talking about improv classes, and you just yes and the person, like you're trying to help them accomplish what they want to accomplish, and you can like bring that to life in a game together, even though the game has rules and bounds. Like you can find a path to success instead of just the walls.
Well, and it's
So
also,
I feel
it's
that.
also the approach, right? Because my approach is it's very open, but I also, instead of the approach of giving you all of the expletive in the tutorial, I like the tutorial being part of level 1. Instead of, like some games where they're like, here's the tutorial.
Hmm.
Here's how you do this, 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 here's how you do this. All right, now go play the game.
Hmm.
I like to do it to where it's like, okay, here's the game. So here's how you walk forward. Go walk around. Cool. You good walking around. Okay. Did you want to try to jump over that? Oh, it looks like you can. You walk up to it. There's the jump button. Okay, you learned that because you wanted to do it.
Hmm.
So you learned it instinctually when you needed to. Not I told you in a whole list. Here's the everything that you can do.
And then as you
My
continue doing things, yeah,
Yeah, my approach to DMing, especially with brand new players,
for
is
sure.
is really trying to get them to realize that, especially with the way I play, everything's interactable, everything's open. It's up to you to interact with it, but the rules come when you bump into those invisible walls, right? When you say, "Oh, so I do this," be like, "Okay, to do that, here's the steps we'll need to follow." Instead of, again, up front being like, "Here's a little box you have to be in." It's like, "Okay, here's an option that you can do," and then once you want to push beyond that option, it's like, "Okay, well, now you've unlocked the next steps you need." And that is an easier way, because then if they don't want to do it, then they can just, oh, I don't want to do that. Let me go try something else that sounds better.
Mhm.
But instead of it giving them, a diatribe of all of the rules, it's just feeding them until they're lose interest in it or until they're like, oh
That's the
wait, so what
thing.
does that mean? And then they get more and they're like, oh, what does that mean? And then you cater the game to them. That's how I cater the game to my players is I trickle feed them what they need to know so they can experience what they want to experience instead of telling them from the get-go all of the limitations of what their race means, what their class means. It's more of a okay, what type of gameplay do you want? And then I will suggest the directions they want to go. And that's where that customization works in, right? Instead of trying to figure out what they want to look like at level 20, it's what do you want to do right now? If you were to fight someone, would you hit him with a bow? Would you want to be hidden and shoot them with a bow? Would you want to be up in their face and yelling at them and hitting them with a hammer? Like, would you want to be cool and cast a spell and freeze them in place, right? Like, you get to the idea of what they want to interact with and what they want to experience and then you build it slowly. So by the end, everything they wanted, they got because you basically kind of did the yes and instead of having someone try to build something from the end and then telling them they can't get there. Every time they wanted something, you've told them how to get there instead of that they can't have it.
Right.
And that's what I like to do. Is it's all about the
And
that unlock chart, but it's more about why do you want to get there and do you want to continue down this path.
it also kind of stops the min max mentality and turns it into here's a character, go allow this character to follow whatever path that character wants to, because then they're literally building the character instead of just focusing on the stats and how strong I am and all. I'm just like, here's what I want to do in the game. Oh, I want to be more dexterous, or I want to be stronger, I want to be faster, I want to be smarter, like whatever it is, you go out and seek out the things that'll make you do that because it'll let you do the stuff you want to do.
And the thing is with min maxing too, it's like that will actually get you to min max a lot better in high point at least, right? Because if you're just playing a module with fifth edition, by the book rules, it's easy to min max because all of the numbers are there, right? But building that character, especially with me, especially because it's always about what do you want to get out of it, and I'll teach you how to get there. You're going to build combinations that aren't obvious, right? You're going to get unique abilities that you've curated to yourself based on how we've narrated your character growth instead of it just being a here's a static list of what it means and how much damage you can do with it.
Mhm.
Because again, taking everything into account, right? If you have an ability but you've learned to use it in a certain way, you might get a bit different benefit than somebody who just chose the ability because it said it could do this.
Right.
Like it's that idea of I'm so much more into the narrative of stacking abilities than I am about min-maxing them. If you can show me how two unrelated things can be used together, I will absolutely give you a benefit the book has never told you is available, right? If you say you want an outcome of something and you explain a really awesome way to get that outcome, but it's nowhere in the book, fuck yeah, we're gonna let it happen. It may be a once and only time situation, but again, it's if that narratively makes sense, right? I'd much prefer it to narratively make sense and bend and break the rules than for it to make absolute no narrative sense. But hey, the rules allow it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I saw this other this you've been sending me some TikToks that I haven't gotten back into responding
Oh,
yet,
no
but I
worries.
have seen them and I have them saved. But I saw this one recently that again kind of irritated me because I get the meminess of, the monk that can travel at the speed of sound and go like a mile in his
Sure, sure.
turn.
Yeah.
And we all get the idea. Like, I get it. That's how the rules are technically written, but technically, rules that intended, there's no way you should be able to cover that amount of distance in 6 seconds. Like, even though it says you can increase your movement, there's still technically a point where it's obvious that that's not how it was meant to be used, but that's how it's written.
Yes.
And whatever you want to think about that, that's fine, whatever. But there was this one that really got to me because someone was trying to make the same argument, but it was with a fly ability. And it was like, it was either a spell, I think it was a spell or something else that said it gives you flight of a certain speed.
Okay.
But then they go on to say, like, but I could do all of these other things. And so basically, I'm like flying at like Mach 5. And I'm like, first of all, when something gives you a fly speed, nothing else modifies it. Like if the spell says it gives you a fly of 60, you can't then change your natural speed to get more flight, right? Like shit like that doesn't stack. The spell gives you an ability. If anything else affects it, It's which ones
I
take like
actually very much agree with that
those would be my
ruling.
like. So it
And
was just this
specifically
case
if specifically if you get it from magic. Because
exactly.
unless what you're doing to go faster is a magic spell that enhances the spell,
Like yeah, exactly.
that then maybe you could get it to go faster if you're enhancing the spell, but that's not what you're doing. You're trying to double your speed. But I don't think you can do that.
Exactly. And so it's like there's a
Haste
point to
might be an option. Haste might
yeah.
be.
And this is why I'm just like there's part of me that I don't want to like do um what's the word I'm looking for?
Reactions.
Yeah, I don't want to do too much like reactionary stuff. I don't want to do like not negative commentary, but like I don't want to like antagonize,
Right.
but there's just part of me that just so badly just wants to just get on there and just be like, this doesn't fucking work this way, people. Like, because it does bug me that it's one thing to min max, but then it's another to try to abuse loopholes of wording when it's like, but that's not fundamentally how it works. Just because you read this and are like, but if you read it together, this is what it says. It's like, but that's not, they were never meant to be read together. You know what I mean? It's again, it's like making a monk move at the sound, the speed of sound. Just because all of these different things technically say they do all of this, the idea that they would stack in this way does not make any sense whatsoever and officially shouldn't work. But there's no official rule that it doesn't, but there's also no official rule that it does. There's no mechanic that technically says this all
Yes.
stacks this way. And it's the downside of the difference between speed and movement and how those two words are synonymous and used. And it's like, yeah, it's just, it's ridiculous that you can do 5 things that all affect one thing and think that they all affect it accumulatively instead of saying, well, if you could move 30 feet in 6 seconds and this ability doubles that and this ability adds 5 feet, well, guess what? Which one are you using? Are you using the one that doubles or the one that uses 5? Now, everyone would think, well, I do the 5 and then I double that. No,
No.
that's not.
Yeah.
Technically,
You're doing
that's
one
not
of
how
those
this
things
shit.
within the 6 seconds.
Exactly. It's like the idea that you use all these things to stack. It's like that's not technically how it works.
Yeah.
It's like when you and I talk about fighting, right? It's like because the I think a lot of people, especially in D&D, it is fantasy. So fair point to want to use video games, movies, and choreographed fights to envision D&D. Totally understandable why. It looks better. Choreographed fights will always look better than any real life tournament you've ever seen.
Sure.
Hands down.
Yep.
Like I have been to so many real life fights and there's nothing like seeing two people actually know their skills and fight. But I've never ever witnessed what I would call a badass scene in real life. Like, you know what I mean? Like what you see in the movies, like those moments where there's like 5 like perfect deflections and they're just like
Yeah.
perfect. That shit doesn't really happen, at least not to the choreographed pace. You know what I mean? Like shit like that happens. People are good. I've seen some really good maneuvers, but
It's
movies
not-
make it look
yeah.
so much cooler.
The movies make it feel like every moment of it is that.
And so you and I have had these these arguments where it's like how certain like reactions in combat should be used, right? Because or like how we have a disagreement with flurry of blows in the sense of our interpretation of individual targets versus multi targets.
Oh,
Like we've had that conversation.
yes.
And it's like, so fundamentally, I totally fundamentally understand that in the heat of combat, if you have multiple targets and if you are intentionally and aware of engaging all of the targets, switching between targets at a moment's notice, especially if you've been able to recognize you've taken a substantial blow to one, like you know you're going to knock him down. You felt it in the kick, you felt it in the hit, so you move targets. I'm not going to argue that that is a valid point in combat. But I also think that that's much more likely in choreographed combat than in real life. Because more times than not in real life, you aren't engaging multiple targets. You are aware of multiple targets, but not necessarily actively engaging multiples on average.
That is very fair.
And in D&D, more times than not, even if you have a target next to you, you are typically engaging one target at a time. So my argument of flurry of blows being against one target is more of the mindset of while it's understandable you could change targets, in my interpretation, the idea is if I'm attacking one and then I activate this, it's that Bruce Lee move of, or like the just like the not necessarily the Bruce Lee, but like that instant move of I hit you once and then I just follow it up with like the devastating like I hit you in the face to where you block and then I just go for your chest.
The JoJo punches.
Yeah,
yoda, yoda, yoda.
Exactly. Just the one where you just go after them because you saw the opening and you just said I can hit you. It's not going to be the hardest punches, but it's going to be well placed.
Why does it give me what Agent Smith did to Neo in the subway tunnel when he was doing the sideways punches?
That's what I'm talking about, right? It's like you see that or it's like in the kung fu movies where they punch once and then they go da-da-da-da, like like on their sides, or they'll kick someone in the face and then like I understand that yes, you can move from one enemy to the other, but my argument being that in the middle of a flurry of blows, you've already put so much momentum.
Emphasis
is to go what? That's not how your body moves. Now, in your case, as a martial artist, hitting 2-3 times and then switching target because you know that your last hit was going to push him off you is more planned than, in my opinion, my interpretation of what flurry of blows is, which is I see an opening and I'm going to rat-a-tat-tat.
Yes.
And that's why I can totally understand our arguments. Neither of us are correct because rules as written does not state whether or not they can or cannot attack multiple targets. Sure. It does not stop you from it, and it doesn't say you can. So like I said, like I love those arguments or those discussions because while we both have like you have a real world experience going, I can do that. But my interpretation of the moment that you activate it isn't the same as I'm going to attack 3 people right now. It's I saw an opening and I'm going for it.
And I will say I agree with your distinction of movie martial arts versus real life martial arts. And I'll also say, and this is where I probably genuinely think we will differ in a certain aspect, is that I am okay with movie martial arts in that instance where you are Bruce Lee and you got like 3 people surrounding you and you're trying to defend all of them all at the same time. Like I'm okay with trying to, because at the same time, if I'm also trying to make realistic some Naruto stuff, right? Like I feel like it's fair enough that we can make some Bruce Lee stuff.
And that's why I'm okay with, like, let's say I'm a fighter and I have 3 attacks. I'm okay saying, instead of saying I'm going to attack this guy all 3 times and then that's it, you have to attack that guy all 3 times, even if he dies on the first attack. In those cases, I'm like, you can do 1 attack at a time until you know that he goes down. Because as a fighter, you're engaged with them. You see the life go out of their eyes. So if you do the 1 attack and they go down on the first one and then you say, now I change targets, I'm cool with that. And that's what I'm saying. Like in those choreographed moments, those are the times where I want it to look like a movie. I'm with you. When it comes to good combat, that's why I'm okay. Oh, that's a crit. How does it end? You took him out with a crit. Like I'm okay letting, and that's why I think, and I think we've done this way earlier, over a year ago at this point. But we've made the call to action for DMs to be more descriptive in combat, right? Don't just say a miss is a miss. Talk about it glancing off the armor. Talk about it hitting them, but doesn't seem like it phases them. Talk about it being a parry. Talk about it being a sword clash, right? Where they're up the face to face for a second and they get to say some words. Like, bring out the fact that a miss isn't a miss. It just means that it didn't stop them from fighting. Remember, HP is more than damage. It's the will to continue, right? And we've talked about, it's up to us as DMs to bring that to life in the narrative to show that the players aren't, everything the players do isn't necessarily good or bad, right? It's not just black and white. Everything leads to something, right? And we can do more to put those into the descriptors. But that's where I think we deserve to make it look more like a movie. Don't make a miss just you missed. Make a miss look fucking cool. Make it to where you miss, but if they miss by 1, put fear in the enemy's eyes. Make the enemy step back a second, like he's afraid. You know what I mean? Like you can make it impactful without it actually causing damage, right? And I agree with you. So I agree with the movie sense. I think where we do differ is, while I like the yes and while I like things to look good, there are some areas where I'm just like, I just can't see that it is somehow justifiably motive. There are some things that even in the movies, I wouldn't
I'll
be
say
able to
this.
justify how it
I'll
looks.
say this. I'll say this. And I appreciate this distinction because especially when it comes to you as the DM, the theater of your mind is the foundation of the theater of our minds, right?
True, true.
And so when we're doing all the things that we're doing, it's like imagine you're loading into the Matrix, right? And the program that's being loaded up around you is coming into view. You're the computer bringing that to life. You are the ones that's bringing all of that. And so the physics in which operate within that world need to operate in the theater of your mind.
True. For me
And
to stay consistent,
and
I
if they
need to have those
don't,
boundaries.
then that's just not you're not going to get the best creation. You're
Right.
going to have glitches. You're going to have issues. It's not
I
going to
like
work
that.
right.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, so I very much appreciate that mindset, and I think that's what players should hopefully recognize. But again, the program won't exist without the players.
Yeah.
You know, so it's very much a mutual situation.
And that was one of my favorite, more recent disagreements that we've had on stream, is because again, those are the things that I think appreciate the most about both of us being here, and bringing those different viewpoints, right? Because I could talk about mine all day long, but
Sure.
the fact is I don't disagree. I don't use yours, but I don't disagree that it's about its correctness, right? Like you said, in your sense, you would be totally fine with your players being like, I use flurry of blows against 3 people, and you're like, cool, like doesn't matter. You're totally fine with that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, and
Sure,
I would
sure.
play in your world with that rule. It's just that for me, I'm like, I don't like that ruling. I would say that at least with that particular ability in the way that it's used, it's got to be used against one, and that's fine for me, right?
Very much
But
so.
I kind of like that idea of being able to give chat and the audience those differences and be like, what do you guys think? Like, you guys get to choose who you agree or disagree with, and maybe you have your own version. You know,
Yeah.
maybe someone's like, I like both of those, so I let people either before they do it, they have to select all targets or one target. Like, that's an easy down the road, down the middle, where someone's just
Right.
like, you can use flurry of blows, but you have to identify out the gate one target or multiple targets, right? You can't change it halfway through. So it's kind of shit like that, right? Where it's
Okay.
like, I like the idea that flurry of blows is a great ability, but the rules as written shouldn't be the absolute only way you interpret it, right? Like, you shouldn't just say, it doesn't say that there's a limit, so there is no limit.
Right.
And it doesn't say you can have multiple targets, so you can't have multiple targets. Well, neither of those are correct statements, because it doesn't say it. So, we just want to be there to be like, you can interpret
Yeah.
it however the fuck you want. It's just, you know what I mean? Like, until the book says this is exactly the limits of it, be willing to work with your DM, right? Like, be
Yes.
willing to have the conversation. And as DMs, be willing to work with your players. Like what Kage just said. Yes, our rules, like, I have that strict rule, but Kage is a player. And when my player comes to me and says, here's how I would like it to work, or here's how I think it could work, we will have that conversation. And in the end, if he doesn't like my ruling, he doesn't have to play in my realm. But at the end, the whole point was, I'm willing to listen and just be willing to be like, in this particular case, I don't agree with that particular ruling, right? But as long as I'm consistent with it, right? As long as it's consistent, and as long as the reason why I'm doing it is for the purposes of the greater cohesion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of it just being, well, I don't want you to do it because I didn't think of it. That's bullshit, right? It's that whole thing of players should be willing to be like, hey, I know you said this is how it rules, but I either A, don't agree with it, or B, would like it to be ruled differently if you wouldn't mind hearing me out. But DMs also have to be willing to listen to that and be like, hey, here's the reasoning why my rule works this way, but let me hear you out, and can either of these things change?
Is there a middle ground? Is there a way for you to get to what again, it goes back to the yes and. It's like, let's see if we can't, figure out how to get you to doing what it is that you want to do, or whatever the case may be, or what that looks like here, or however it needs to go. But again, if at the end of the day it just can't, because whatever it is, maybe it's just too specifically contrary to, again, what your theater of the mind can create, then it has to be able to fit in that space.
Right. And I would even say that even if you're a DM who they're going to bring something up, and what they brought up, you already know, just, I'm sorry, I have very strict rules about this. I still say, hear the player out, because sometimes what I've done is, like, someone will bring up something and they're like, hey, I think this is a different ruling. And I'm like, well, that's kind of like a core core of High Point, but what is your thought? Even if you know that you're not going to change your ruling, hearing them out might at least give you the opportunity to be like, I see what you want and I can't change these rules, but here's an alternative way to get what you're looking for. Because that happens way more often than me changing my rules. Is someone tells me what they want and I'm like, oh, I get what you want. Here's a different way to get it. And oftentimes it's easier. The way I suggest is actually
Right.
easier or faster, or in game they'll be able to get it quicker if they do it a different way than the way that they were thinking. But a lot of the times I think that that can actually disrupt gameplay and progress, because I'm sure there's a lot of times where players have ideas and DMs kind of shut them down before they understand the full breadth of the idea. And instead of offering them an alternative way to get there, they just say, well, you can't do it that way. And it's like, but are you really looking at what they want, or are you just denying changing up the way that you want to do things? Right. Because
Yeah.
if you're only looking at it from the prism of you're trying to change the way I've ruled it, then yeah, you're just going to say no. But if you look at it from the point of view of, well, how do I give you what you want, even if I don't like the way you're trying to get it? How
Sure,
else
sure.
would you get it? And then you work with them with that, right? And that's what I'm really excited if my friends end up wanting to do any kind of D&D. I think that would be really interesting to see what kind of questions brand new players will have, being able to show off like this entire process, what we're talking about in
Mhm.
terms of how do we. I have plenty of rules. I mean, you know this. I have plenty of rules and boundaries. Not everything in my world is just what the players want. But more often than not, if the players want something, there's a way to obtain it. And I usually try to present that in a way that's not only feels obtainable and not just like a laundry list of like, here's a novel of how you do it. But I also feel like I try to explain it in a way that also makes it feel interesting and enticing to go do, right?
Mhm.
Like here's an adventure for you, whether or not it's a whole campaign, but it's like, oh, you want to get that. Here are some easy to follow steps, and they fit, and I try to make it fit right in line with their character. So it's like, if you want to do that, here's how you do it, but here's also how your character would go about doing it.
Mhm.
So I give them the mechanical explanation of, oh, you would need to find someone in game, and you would need to pay the right amount of money and be able to get the materials. By the way, where you are, you happen to know that there's an old hermit in the nearby woods, and on the way, you know that there's a couple trees you might be able to find these ingredients from, and you happen to get paid next week from your job. Like I could set them up with the here's how we get it done, and here's how your character would probably go about it. Is that how you want to game right now? And if
Right.
and if that's enticing and they're like, well, that's it, that's all I have to do. Well, fuck yeah, let's go. Or they might go, oh, that's probably a little bit more complicated. I kind of just wanted something easy. Maybe I'll go find something a different way to do it, right?
Sure, sure.
And that's to me way more interesting than just here's how you go do it, yes or no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like or just saying, oh, that's what we're doing. Okay, here's the gameplay. You're doing this now. I like it to be much more of that again, that the world is full of options. It's just I like to be I like to represent the reality of what's the gameplay, right? If someone says, I want to go do this, and I'm like, so you built this fighter build and you want to go do this thing. This thing's going to be very diplomatic. It's going to be a lot of talking. And you know that you're going to have to go through all of these royals. But you might be able to go over here and do this person a favor, which might include some, swinging of your sword, and maybe they'll be able to obtain it for you.
Mhm.
That's the kind of world that I want to present with High Point, right? Is it may not always be that clear cut, but the idea is that if a player has been built to fight and they want to go do something that I realize is going to take them very far away from fighting, I'm not going to be the DM that goes, "Oh, sucks to be you. I guess we're not going to have your." It's like, no, that's no fun for me, and that's no fun for them. I
They'll
want
just get
them
yeah.
to. You want to give them the idea of like, is this really what you want to go after? Here's the reality of what it's going to take. I can make it enticing, but I can only make it so enticing. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I can't I can't physically shape everything to be combat, but I can at least let you play your character out the way you would play it.
It's not what am I thinking of, like, making mundane things combat, like playing cards, like Yu-Gi-Oh, where you're literally, like, bringing out, like, these monsters that are, like, attacking things, you know? Like,
Oh
I
man.
can't make everything combat. Or
It's like you're gonna buy a property and there's a monster inside that will slowly eat your coins. It's called the tax monster. But if you can defeat it, you'll actually be able to cut your property tax in half.
wild. Wild, wild. I love it.
uh, see what was going on in chat. Tabaxi monk with the boots of speed. Exactly, right? Like those ideas where people will do that, right? It was like, well, the Tabaxi monk can do this with their speed, but then the boots do this. It's like, but the boots are their own individual like thing, right? So whatever the Tabaxi could do on its own, doesn't trump or doesn't necessarily add to what the boots do. Like the boots and the tabaxi do two different things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the boots either do something for you or you're doing something physically, but they don't, one doesn't happen and then the other.
Right.
If they're happening at the same time, they cancel each other out, right? So yeah, it's so interesting. I might do a series of that one day where I just, instead of do like, like stitching the TikToks, I might just do a series where I take just all of those ridiculous builds and just sit down and just explain why I'm just like, this is why it doesn't work. Like, raw versus rye.
Okay.
Like
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah.
break down, here's why you say it works as the rules is written, but rules is intended, here's why it shouldn't. And actually just do a series where I'm just like, here's why all your loopholes are bullshit.
There it is. There's your series name. Here's why.
Here's why. I
Here's
like
why.
that. Let's see. The way my character is a great sword, but they're always moving the sword around their body, which allows them to just quickly slash on certain targets. That's an interesting way to look at it. And again, if you're playing that, like again, that right there, Marty, that's a great example, right? If I have two different characters and one's just in, says I'm in full plate armor, I carry this sword, I just have it up on my shoulder, and when we're fighting, I just swing it whenever I attack, right? Versus if I have the other character say, whenever combat starts, I just start swinging my sword. Like that's just was their thing. Whenever they say combat starts, one says I pull my sword and get into a stance, and the other says I just start swinging around my body. I'm the DM in High Point where you will both get absolutely different. You will get to do different things. The person just holding the great sword will not be able to do the same things as the person swinging the sword consistently. But vice versa, the other one might have something better, right? Like I might be able to allow the person who's stationary to do like I'm just going to come down, like, just full let the sword drop on somebody. That might do extra damage versus the other person who's been swinging around isn't going to have just the pure that, they're going to have momentum, but they're not going to have that pure drop force.
Right.
But like what Marty said, the person swinging it around, I would totally let them change target or even get a better a chance to block more. Because like the other person can't parry. If you have a great sword, you're not going to parry attack from your side. You're not going to swing that sword fast enough to parry. But the person constantly swinging it around, maybe I'll give them a bonus to parry an attack because the sword's already in motion, and to just knock someone's sword out of the way would be easy. So that's the kind of DM I am. Was when I tell people, it's like, yes, we go by the book. If you have two identical characters wielding the same weapon, yes, by the book, by the rules, you will both do the same amount of damage. But if you tweak something like that in combat, if you say you're doing something that's, just that little bit of a tweak, you're going to be able to get bonuses that the other player doesn't. Because of stuff like that. Because I'm okay. If you just say I swing my sword, then you just swung your sword. But if you add that extra bit of ability, I don't need that to be an official feat. I don't need that to be in the core rule book to justify why that should give you a bonus right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm okay. And that's why I don't need everything to be a guaranteed, if you do it, then everybody who makes this character is going to get that same feat. I reward the fact that you, the player, and your character thought of doing that with the skill sets and the tools you have at your disposal.
Yeah.
Because I don't necessarily understand, why would everybody who picked up the same weapon immediately come up with that idea? You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make any sense that every person in existence who ever picked up this weapon instantly knows how to do this. I like the idea that there are some things that get trained when you train on a weapon, and there are some things that you just learn by experience, or you were lucky enough to have a mentor that taught you, or you just came up with your own. Like
now, to me, what I'm about to represent goes against the spirit in which I would play in, because it just wouldn't make sense to me.
okay.
But if every player at their table that used the sword started doing the same thing and trying to gain the same benefit, would you say that that's okay? Like even if they were like, "Hey, I trained the other guys
Yeah,
to do this thing
if
that I'm
someone
doing."
came up with an ability, like let's say you had a team that all had the same weapon, and someone came up with an ability and it worked, and they wanted to perfect it, and they say, "Can I train everybody else in doing it?" Yeah, that is no different than you finding an NPC to train you. Like that is okay because that makes sense. What I don't understand is you made a character who learned that ability in this gaming group, and then 6 months later we create a brand new gaming group, and person over here creates that same class and goes, "I want that ability." Why? How? How would you have known that ability? That ability was in a different gaming campaign with a different character, but player knows it, so they want it. That's to me what I don't want. I don't want to make a cookie cutter subclass just because one person did it once means that everyone gets to do it forever. But in the context of if someone sees you doing it and you train them to do it, yes, they can do it. That is 100% okay because you learned it in the context of how you should learn it.
Now, from my perspective, if you really wanted to get froggy and you really wanted it and it was that important to you, I'd be like, put it in your backstory. That's your great 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 grandma.
Or
And
you
it was
could,
like a
yeah.
and it was a move that like saved her husband's life one day, and so it got passed down
And
from
you know what I'm saying?
generation to
It's like
generation. It's like this
shit like
family.
that. But it's like, okay, like with Doft, right? Like I'm okay if someone wants to create another Earthbender class,
Sure, sure.
but they aren't going to, I'm not going to tell them out the gate, by the way, you can parkour with better agility because of your bending.
Hmm.
That's not something all benders are just naturally going to be able to do. You learned that because you were a street rat who did parkour, and just by dumb luck over time, you were like, wait a minute, this actually makes sense. I can do this. Why would every bender in existence learn? Like, it's not something that everyone would think about because that's not a tool everybody needs. But someone could come up with that, or you, as Dovd, could train some other player who wants to be a bender, and sure, they could learn that and then go use that ability.
Hmm.
But if someone creates another bender in the future, it's not going to be like, by the way, you can do this, you can shape, sand, I'll give them all the basics. You can shape sand, you can do all of this, but I'm not going to be like, oh, and by the way, you also get a +2 to agility checks when
Hmm.
you're parkouring. That's not going to be a base ability. They will have to come up with that, learn it, or for some reason acquire said knowledge. Because for me, those kind of things are cool. But where fifth edition says, well, that's a whole subclass, that's what it should be. It's like, to me, that's the whole point about playing the character, learning what makes you unique. What did you get out of the abilities? That's why I'm like, I could have two people have the same sword, but you guys could get different bonuses on the attack. You could be the same class, have the same build, have the same sword, but you could have a +2 to AC and this person could have a +2 to attack because you guys are just acting different, because you're playing the character different. You could have all of the same feats. You could literally create identical characters and I would still give you different bonuses because of what you say you do, not because of what you have. To me, that is D&D. Like that is why I love second edition, is because it's so much more about what you choose to do, not what's on paper. What's on paper starts what you can do, right? It's just the foundation. It
Hmm.
just gives me the basics. I know how minimum amount of damage your sword can do
Sure, sure.
because that's what's on paper. But if you use that sword in a way that would obviously indicate you could inflict more damage, why wouldn't I give it to you? To me, that's what being a DM is all about in terms of like an open world. Is it's not just how did you get from point A to point B. It's why and what did you do and what were the steps that were taken and how that story differs from the next person who tried to do the same thing but got a different result. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So it's like that's to me I think the one little thing that while I love looking at 5th edition subclasses, that's the hardest thing for me is just looking at the fact that every single person in existence that becomes this learns the
Now
same
just
shit.
magically is doing the same stuff.
And that's why it's hard for me. And that's why I still will always be second edition based. I will still
Sure, sure.
take all of this great suggestions and all of these amazing mechanics that fifth edition has given me.
Of course. Yeah,
But
that's what we're here to do.
exactly. But when it comes to people like if someone comes to me and like let's say one of my player, one of these new players comes to me and they see a fifth edition podcast and they see this subclass and they come to me and say, "Can I be this subclass?" I'm going to be like, "Sure." Because even though it doesn't exist in High Point or in second edition, I'm going to be like, let's break it down. What do you like about it? What part of this do you want to be? And I would take all of that and I would figure out what is the easiest, most convenient way for them to achieve it in High Point. And then we would bake it into their development, the actual character development, right? Instead of just saying, yes, this is exactly what it's going to be, and here's what you're going to get every round or every level, it's just going to be okay, what do you want to gain from this? What about it is interesting? And then we're going to convert it into what is the way that you would most likely be able to get all of this and how
Yeah.
is it going to be interesting to your character build, not just again what we've talked about is not forcing something to make sense narratively because it's part of the rules, but making something that makes better narrative sense and allowing the narrative to shape it and then just stay within the confines of the rules
Yeah.
versus, hey, this thing works by the rules even though it doesn't make sense to be here, but it works, so I should be able to do it. Like,
Let me break the rules. You heard of the peasant cannon?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like just because it works on paper doesn't necessarily mean that that's exactly how it will operate, you
Hmm.
know? So yeah, so I'm really hoping that we can do a little bit of high point gaming. Uh,
That'll be very cool. That'll be very cool.
I've already been talking to Vixie about we've already kind of rekindled her campaign, so
Oh,
that's
wonderful.
been progressing. She needs to talk to you about Old Gods because she wants to also rekindle Old Gods.
Yes.
And we'll probably have to
I
continue recording that.
definitely want to do that.
And we need to talk about when we are going to meet up and update Dove as well.
Yes.
So we'll do all of
We've
that
got some
soon.
some work for that. But yeah.
Some or all of that may be recorded and go on stream. We'll see.
That
Uh,
would be cool.
but once we get those three figured out, then my other friends will let me know if and when they'll be interested to give more gaming a try. We might even do Faction 5. I might even try to rekindle
Wow.
that. I don't know. Um, they have kids
That,
now, so
that is fair.
it's going to be a lot harder to rekindle that one.
That's fair enough.
But yes. So what else do
Unless
we have in
the
chat?
little man becomes familiar.
Yeah, right. Marty, one of their favorite misses was a character going for a swing on an enemy, accidentally parrying a blow to his back. It was going for an overhead strike. Okay, so yeah, so just again, just the
I like
idea
that.
that you
I
can
really do like
still
that.
you can still strike, but or you can still hit something, just not do damage, right? Like a miss just isn't a whiff. And I think
Right.
too many people just like there's not enough narrative showing the true combat. Um there's actually a new type of combat that I've been wanting. I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm still trying to work out the mechanics. But I really want to have an alternative to combat where it's essentially to help better do cinematics, having everybody just state like what they're going to do. Like basically kind of like give quick snapshots to the DM of like what they're gonna do. Instead of going like one by player by one, like, hey, what are you gonna do? Let's roll it all out and figure it out.
Hmm.
It's more like, okay, you're attacking him, you're doing this, like kind of get a snapshot of what everyone's doing, and then let the DM just narrate as one giant scene. So it's you know what I mean, kind of
Interesting.
like up preload with everything that's being done, and then let him just then let the
Calculate
DM
all the things that are actually going down.
and then narrate the scene because a lot of the times it gets kind of hard to keep track when everyone's just doing one by one. You're like, oh, I'm attacking this enemy, and then I do damage, and then I switch to this enemy, and then I switch to this enemy, and then I'm gonna run over here, and then I'm gonna pop a potion, and then it's your turn. You're like, wait, so he was where, and he ran where, and then who's dead? Like, it can be a lot, but if everyone's just like, look, I'm gonna do 2 strikes on this guy, and if he goes down, I'll do my other strike on this guy. It's like, okay, and then as you see him striking this guy, what are you doing? So you're almost kind of like doing the gameplay first and then you do the rolls after to kind of keep everyone engaged, right? Like,
Right.
and then you can also do timing better, right? Like if the fighter has 3 strikes, he says, I'm gonna do all 3 strikes on this guy, right? And you go back, okay, start rolling your all your dice. Because then you go right to the next guy, and you're like, okay, you see him swing once at this guy, he's going in for the second strike. What are you doing? So you actually prime them of when their character would begin their reaction. And then you're like, well, I'm gonna do my spell. And I'm like, okay, so roll me for your spell. So after the 2 strikes, you see him going for a third. You see him starting his incantation. What are you doing? Right. So again, you're almost like priming every player with what they've seen up till this point, but not what has yet to happen.
Hmm.
So again, the mage has already casted a spell, only 2 attacks into the 3. This guy is now acting on his third attack. This guy is going to act after he's seen all of this, but he may still not see what happens with the wizard's spell.
Hmm.
So this way you can almost get that whole thing of he goes, well, I'm going to shoot an arrow over here. And then it goes, okay, well, as you shoot that arrow, the magic goes off and a bolt of lightning strikes him. Your arrow comes down and he falls and you miss the body because like you could do
Right.
more unique things where, yes, it kind of, no one wants to attack an enemy that's already down, but it's almost like if you did it in that narrative block, it's almost like you really wouldn't have known he was going to be down yet, right? Because instinctually, or not instinctually, but in terms of instances, right?
Right.
In terms of the uh, initiative, you may have both struck the same person. So I'm kind of working on a way to explain this to DMs, like in wording, like for the ADMG, like how would you explain this type of gameplay to where you narrate technically in the correct order that everybody sees things happening in, but then you do all of the math after the fact, right? So you narrate it and then you get it through. Because again, it's like that whole thing of like you're having them roll the dice, but you don't calculate it just yet. You
Mhm.
don't calculate it until it matters. You're like, okay, then he does his turn. So what was that first damage? You did hit, roll me damage. Okay, he's still up, and then your turn. Okay, now do your second damage. Okay, now he's down. Now you see him drop. Your spell goes off, and then you see him drop. Your thing goes off as you see him drop, and you see him drop right before you act.
Mm.
So you're actually getting everybody to be more engaged with every step of combat instead of waiting for
Interesting.
your turn. Does
Interesting.
that make more sense?
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it.
I just
It
don't know how you would explain that
I
without
feel like
showing it.
I feel like there might be a way to make that flow really, really well. Um,
I want to try it
but
out.
yeah.
I want to actually give that a try in one of my gaming sessions just to see how people like it.
Okay.
Let's see. Hoilepa. One of my role as a player, the DM is right, even if I yeah, rule as a player is the DM's right, even if you don't like it. The role discussion comes after the session. Um, you, I respect that. I respect holding off until the end of the gaming session. I would say that it depends on the discussion. You know what I mean? I think that there are very, very
I
valid
agree.
times
I
and very
agree.
valid questions that should be brought up in the moment. Um, I don't necessarily agree that the DM's always right. And again, it's always situational, right? If it's about their world, it's more likely they're right. If it's about a hard and fast rule, like if the DM is ruling that a spell operates differently than, like, if you were looking at the spell and say, I cast this spell,
It
here's
does
how it works,
this.
and he says, no, it does this, that is an absolute okay time to at least clarify. Am I right in assuming this is a custom spell, or are we going off the spell in the book? Simply because that's not what I'm reading. That's okay, right? It's totally fine to just get clarification. Hey, I just want to understand what spell I'm casting because I thought it did something different. You don't have to say you're wrong. Just
Sure, sure.
why is the what I thought I was casting different? Can you just point me to the right resource? That's okay to do in the moment. That's something that I would feel bad if I did something like that and you come to me at the end of the gaming session and go, "Oh, shit, that could have changed the whole battle, couldn't it?" Like, to
Yeah,
me,
exactly.
but again, if it's more of one of those things where it's like, hey, you said Tiamat was a green dragon and Tiamat's not a green dragon. What's going on with that? That's a question you might want to ask after the session because maybe there's
In-game
lore,
reasons.
or
Yeah,
maybe not,
yeah.
or maybe it was just a flub and it's not really that big of a deal, right? So those are extreme differences. But I would say that while I respect the idea of respecting your DM, there are some questions that are absolutely okay to get clarification on in the moment, especially because if it can drastically change the outcome of things, or if it can drastically change your understanding of what's happening, either gameplay wise or plot
Yeah.
wise, those are times you absolutely should be
And
encouraged to ask in the moment.
I will say it can be hard because I've found myself in situations where I didn't know how drastically my perception was incorrect based upon an an unfortunate understanding.
It happens all the time,
You know what I mean?
especially with theater of the mind. I mean, it really is one of the hardest things with theater of the mind is
Yeah, it's
to
like
have everyone on the same page.
it's and you try to, and like I have learned to, if I am 2% unsure, ask. Like 2% unsure, ask. Just clarify. So I'm like, and I feel like I go overboard with it sometimes. Like, just clarify. Like this is what's gonna happen. Just clear. We're
And
talking
that's
about it,
totally, and
and I
exactly.
try to make sure I'm on the same page so that because I hear a lot of other people asking questions later on, and I understand why they think what they think, but I clarified earlier, and I
Yeah.
got that understanding. So
And that's why I feel like the good rule of thumb is if it can change the outcome of the situation, or if it can change your perception of what's going on with either gameplay or the plot, it's time to ask in the moment. There's never a bad time if you honestly think that it's like, again, if the combat could change, if what you read and thought was going to happen versus what the DM is saying could truly be the change of the battle, that should be an okay moment to be like, I'm sorry, I thought this is what was going to happen.
mhm.
Maybe this isn't what I wanted to do. Maybe I made a mistake. Because if you just let it go, maybe you are wrong, and maybe you should have done something else, but the DM's just going to roll with it because you didn't say something, or the DM could be wrong and it changes the battle. But again, if it's also plot point wise or gameplay wise, if the party has to make a decision and you're not sure about what the DM said and you're not going to ask the questions after the gaming session, that could change the decision. It could change your fundamental understanding of where you are in the plot, what
Yeah.
decisions you need to do next, where you need to go. Those are times I'm totally fine if someone wants to clarify and ask a question. If it isn't really going to alter anything and it's just more of a, I thought it was different, or, I thought that name was different, or, maybe I thought we were in a different town. If it's not going to fundamentally change anything that's happened or will happen in terms of decision making, excuse me, those are fine waiting until the after session. But I would, just having had players have questions as a DM, I would feel so bad if someone came to me with a question after the session and I found out that it could have changed their decision making.
Right.
If it, like, again, it's happened with you and me, where you've come to me and been like, so I just want to make sure that this is what happened. And I'm like, no, this is what happened. And then you're like, fuck, I would have done something completely different. Like, we've learned that after the fact.
Yeah.
And it sucks. We've learned to better communicate since then.
Sure.
But as a
Most
DM,
definitely.
it does suck because you think that everyone's on the same page. And then you're like, oh, well, I completely misled you and I didn't mean to. So that's where I would just caution you, Hoylepa, is I love that you respect your DM that much, but I would encourage you that if it's enough to change things, it's worth enough to ask.
Yeah.
And again, asking is not necessarily disagreeing or questioning. Like, don't question me. It's not about questioning. It's looking for clarification.
Yeah.
If you always come at it from the point of view of looking for clarification and not questioning their reasoning, it's a much better approach of,
I will
hey, I'm
say-
not saying you're wrong. I just want to understand better.
Approach is everything, because I've definitely been in scenarios where I've seen people just get unnecessarily aggressive with their questions, very just argumentative about the whole thing, and then just becomes like, that's not what this, it's just too much. And so like,
It's
I
that
think-
entitlement.
I think-
Entitlement is what breeds those kind of arguments of
Yeah.
when you want to do a spell and the DM says that's not how it works and you get mad. You're not mad because the rules are different. You're mad because you're not getting what you wanted. I mean, I think we can all agree when players do that, when they get mad at the DM because the DM has a different ruling, it's not the ruling that you're mad at. It's because what you wanted is not happening. That's my personal hot take.
It's definitely hard, but I mean, it's I really feel like a lot of the times that happens because, like you said, people are seeing things incorrectly. And so, like, I don't know. I will, on occasion, if I see somebody acting contrary to what I think makes sense for the situation, I will ask them. Me as the DM, I will ask my player. I'm like, out of curiosity, like, what are you hoping to achieve by this action? Like, what do you think is going to go down? Like, how do you like? What do you want to have happen here? Right?
What is your what is your expectation? Like, because
Yeah.
sometimes they have it in their head, this is what this is going to accomplish, and you're like, but if I don't know that, how am I going to give it to you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're just like, well, I pray to my God, so what do you to you, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Because if you think, well, I pray to my God, so he's just going to show up in person in front of me and like part the Red Sea for me, it's like that's not what a prayer will do. Just letting you know, you're gonna have to do a lot more than a prayer for
Blood
that.
sacrifice, please.
But yeah, but if the player's like, oh well, I'm gonna pray to him and I'm hoping to get some words of wisdom, it's like, okay, so that's your expectation. Okay, like I might be able to facilitate that, but if you're a cleric and you just say the words, well, I'm praying to my God, and then I go attack this enemy, I'm like, cool. But like prayer's not like prayer doesn't do anything. You don't have like anything on your character sheet that says prayer equals like a boost in power. So if you're not going to tell me what the prayer's for,
what are we talking about?
What am I going to do with it? So, but yeah, no, it is great. It is nice to see players who have that level of respect, who don't want to, rock the boat, but DMs aren't perfect. The DMs have so much on their plate that sometimes questions are beneficial. Yes, some DMs don't like questions. And to them, I definitely have.
Hard.
I have my own reservations against DMs who aren't also willing to be the resource, but I get it. There's all types.
Sure.
But yeah, I just feel that it's good that when I like it when players have questions and are willing to ask them, but it has to be in the form of a question, not a challenge.
For sure.
I think that's my biggest thing is question, or it's okay to question. It's not okay to challenge.
Yes.
And that's where the rule lawyeriness comes into play. We have a suggestion: a druid summoning a fairy that polymorphs every party member into a dinosaur. That would be a hell of a way to start a weird campaign.
Polymorphs everyone into a dinosaur?
I mean, that would be a very
So
interesting.
if you wanted to play Land Before Time?
I guess
What?
I'm kind of legit. If you wanted to have a Land Before Time campaign, you could do that. That would be kind of funny. I don't know how that would work exactly, but it would be very interesting.
Wild. Absolutely wild.
From Marty, we have very much enjoyed your races, Marty. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you have enjoyed the reviews of them. Um, they've been very well balanced. It's always nice to have something with some good strong lore to it as well.
Most definitely.
And you should take pride in your work. You absolutely should. They are. I mean, again, they're some of the best put together races I think we've reviewed. And we haven't reviewed a lot of races yet, but they are extremely well put together. And again, they're nice because they don't feel like they belong anywhere specific.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like any setting could pick those up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the true key to writing stuff like that, is being able to make sure that it's easily picked up without a struggle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like any campaign can justify having a hippo race from a swampland or from a water, from like a water area. Like it's not hard to justify that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, not making them a super big stretch, right? They're not like, half crystal, half ethereal beings from, some plane no one's ever heard of, summoned by a god that no one's ever used before,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's just, we have humanoid creatures all the time. So why not a humanoid hippo? Like, it's not a far stretch based on the other things you would normally see.
Exactly. Wild. I like it. I like it. I like it. I like it.
Let's see. Speed of combat is the only reason why I only DM small groups. I feel that. I know a lot of DMs struggle with having more than 4 players. I've even my original DM, who I praised a lot for their DMing ability. Anything over 6 people was a struggle.
Yeah.
And even without the absolute core group, even anything over 4 people that wasn't like the core of us was hard. You know what I mean? Like there was like the core group of us that when it was just us 4 was like rapid, and just like we all knew what to do. We all had our ideas. We were all 5 steps ahead. So it was just like as soon as our turn, we were going. But there were a couple other people in that group that when they were involved, it did just take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So I totally get the idea that, and that's why I want to create a different type of combat, right? If you can create a combat where everybody's involved every step of the way, right? Because a lot of the times you have 4 people, 5, 6 people, and you all have different initiatives, and then you have a bunch of enemies, and you are taking everybody one at a time and doing their entire turn one at a time. That's what takes so long, right? But if you're having everybody technically act simultaneously,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be good at narrating that, and you have to be very good at your control. But like the way that I do combat, because most of the time with not only theater of the mind but with combat, for me it's basic maps, and I just have I have all the enemies out, but I just have a basic list of the initiative order, and I just go off of that, right? So it wouldn't be that difficult for me to just set everybody up with what they're doing. If a fighter wants to attack 3 times, all right, roll your attacks and tell me right now, and then I'll just tell everybody, this is what you're seeing when these things are happening. And everybody's basically getting to pay attention because they're literally going to be acting before the first person's done. They're going to be done, right? Because the entire turn happens all at once.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I like that idea. It's just, can you keep up with it? Like, can you make it seamless, and can you still make it
Yeah.
interactive? Um,
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot on the DM to just know whose role you need to be paying attention to when.
Yeah.
But if you can pull it off, I think it would be way better for the players.
I think it could be very cool. I think it might be hard to do not live. But if you had if you were doing some IRL D&D, I think you might I
Yeah,
think you might be able to pull it off.
I see what you mean by not live. Yeah, doing it remotely or anything else like that would be like very difficult. If you're just doing it, all in person,
Yeah.
way easier,
Yeah.
way easier all in person. All right. Next group of races that Marty's cooking up. He thinks that we'll really like. Um,
Got a group now that are next up on his list. 3 more races that he submitted to us.
3 more. That's good. I'm liking this. I'm liking the variety. That's really nice. Huilepa needs a little bit of help in Discord later. Want to create a subclass for wizards, but don't know what level to put the abilities at.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. If you want to post anything in homebrewing, we can either help. You can either tag one of us or just tag the community. Yeah, we should be able to post at least like some of the basics, like because I mean, usually what we do is we just go look at another wizard subclass. Look at the wizard main class, look at the subclass, and just see what levels they all like.
Yeah.
Perk on. The big question you have to ask yourself, Hoilepa, though, is are you going to use 5e14 or 5e24? Because it seems like there's some people in the community that are going to start submitting 5e24 to us.
Interesting.
So we're going to have to start this year transitioning, at least during review, we'll start to have to keep 2024 in mind.
Okay.
I don't know how easy it is to get the core rulebook right now. I don't know how easy
I know
referenceable
that
it is.
I can access at the very least the same information that I get for our 2014 stuff on 5e tools.
Fantastic.
They have both 2024 and 2014.
Gotcha.
So,
okay, if you can hook Hoilepa up with that, ping Hoilepa in the homebrewing chat or the homebrewing channel, and send them over the link for both 14 and 24. It looks like they don't have the 24 yet. So if you have any like references to how the subclasses work for that, and just posting that for the community in general, just saying, hey, here's the 14 link and here's the 24 link, just for people to be able to like, if there's a reference out there, it's nice to have. So yeah, if you guys want to check that out, or Discord link is in chat right now. But we do have a home brewing chat for the community to kind of get together and just talk about stuff that they're building. So we'll post some links there for 2024 and 2014 reference guides that we use on 5e tools, I think you said. So we'll do that. And then let's see, I think that's going to be us for the rest of tonight. We will be back on Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we have the history of Dragonborn. Last week we did the history of dragons. So we're going to follow it up with the history of Dragonborn. And then next week, I think we'll do probably something a little bit more fun.
Okay.
Not so much another hit. I think we'll take a break from history of, and then we'll do a little bit more interactive. I'm not sure what yet.
Okay.
But we'll figure something out.
I'm here for it.
I know we had a couple other ideas in chat and posted in Discord. So we'll look through and see what other kind of ideas we have.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll be able to do any game streaming this week. If I do, probably just more Rocket League. So if you guys are interested in that, check me out when I'm live. Are you going to be live tomorrow as well for coding?
I'm 50-50 right now.
I'm
50-50 right now. I will let you guys know. I have some things that are in the works, and if they work well, then most definitely. If not, then I might try and hop on later in the week, potentially on Thursday.
Awesome. Well, we do have a chat for that as well. That is the Code Ninja chat in Discord. So if you see the live there, that'll be for Kage and his stream. But otherwise, join us again on Friday. Thank you all so much for joining us for this review. Hope you enjoyed it. Marty, thank you so much for the submission. And we appreciate everybody for joining us, hanging out, keeping us company. Yes, keep those submissions coming, guys. We are at 12 out of 15K for the February community stream. It looks like we're probably going to smash that this Friday.
Wild.
So we will have probably this weekend, we'll have some polls going up for the community stream. So another reason to join the Discord. You also get updates on future streams and a bunch of updates that we're doing behind the scenes as well. But yeah, more updates to come. Potentially a Patreon, more emotes coming, potentially a website here in the near future, and some secret projects that we're working on that are progressing as well.
Absolutely love it.
Stay tuned for all of that. Again, thank you all so much for being here. I just realized that we haven't had ChillHop at all. This was the first time we didn't do ChillHop.
No.
I just totally didn't realize that we weren't listening.
That's all right.
It. All right. Well, anyway,
we rocked it.
I hope you guys had a fantastic weekend, and I hope you guys have a great week ahead of you. We will be back on Friday, everybody. Cheers.
Deuces, my friend.